Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hope you had a good week. Thank you for joining us for the fourth and last um, Doctors on Board workshop sessions. And we congratulate each of you for making it through the last 4 weeks. So we really appreciate this. A couple of quick things. So because we are on a time schedule, um, as I said, this is the last session of the Doctors on Board program. And then you will, if you haven't already began, you will start working on your team projects. Remember again, that is a team project. And I think the deadline date for the projects to be submitted and received by us is either May 8th or May 9th. I will confirm that with the project coordinators, okay? Remember that your parents are in a separate workshop this afternoon. And if somebody wants to join, I guess I can, well, right now we're hoping that no one else wants to join or have sent me an email late asking can they join, but if so, we'll try to do our best. I will be sending each of you an evaluation of the Doctors on Board program. Thank you in advance for if you will return it as soon as possible next week, because we do need it. And we have to include that with our grantors, our funders. So please complete it and return it next week, okay? And then the last thing, for those of you who were unfortunate and who have attended all of the Doctors on Board sessions, or email me if there was a problem with one of them or part of a session, but are unable to participate in a team project, your certificate will say Doctors on Board project, whereas the other certificates will say Doctors on Board and Community Health Internship, okay? So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And unless Tracy or Carolyn has any more comments, we'd like to move to our first amazing speaker and phenomenal supporter of the Doctors on Board program, and on each of you, your journey in terms of becoming a physician. Please welcome Dr. Atalo Brown and his presentation. He'll tell you where he is and we should go from there. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here this morning. My name is Italo Brown. I am an emergency physician. I work currently at Stanford. I also work with Tour for Diversity in Medicine, which essentially is a program similar to this, but we basically provide information around how to navigate health careers. So I want to go ahead and start my presentation. Let me go ahead and pull up the slide for you all. The first presentation today is called The Story That Counts. I really enjoy this presentation. Please let me know if you can see the PowerPoint clearly. We're good? All right, excellent. So this is an interesting thing for me. Whenever I talk about how to deliver or how to write a personal statement, it is extremely important for me because I like to write, but I also remember what it felt like to be in you all's shoes, where you're trying to figure out like how to actually craft this statement that says who you are, and for people to actually listen and read it. And you want to do so much in this like short 500, 800, 1,000 word space sometimes. So I'm here to help you all figure out how to navigate this a little bit better. So let's go ahead and start right into it. What's a personal statement, right? This is a basic description of what we would call a personal statement. It is a written description of your achievements, your interests, your particular journey included as a part of an application for a job or to an educational program. Now, this particular definition, I think, doesn't do it as much justice as I believe thinking about the power of a personal statement would do, right? The statement is more than just providing this random list of things that you do well or things that you're trying to showcase. It's your narrative. It's you delivering a packaged, nice piece of content to a reader that says, this is who this person is. And this is who I want to invest in because of the things that they've been able to go through and the output from that. So I strongly encourage you all to reframe the way that you think about a personal statement. It's not just you making a slush list of things that you do well. It is a snapshot at the entirety of who you are. As I stated, it has to really evoke your voice, and you have to learn how to express the things that are the DNA of who you are, right? Your background, your abilities, the life experiences that you've gone through, and how they perfectly aligned to give you a sense of purpose. And that purpose can be essentially targeted towards the outlet that you're or applying to, right? I got a couple of bullets here I want you to pay close attention to. It's both subjective and objective, okay? Meaning you can give information that is factual, but you also can give personal information that is biased by your lived experience, okay? It contains expert opinion. And who do you think that expert is? Expert's you. No one can tell you that you didn't go through this particular segment of your journey. You're the expert on it. And so you set the tone. I also like the fact that it's the preamble to you. Nobody can summate their entire life experience in a one-page document, but you can give somebody a preface. You can give somebody an introduction. So that preamble, that bold statement that declares, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what I came to do, and this is how you can help me. That particular preamble is powerful. And you have to understand that if you write it the correct way, it will resonate in the minds of the readers. So how do personal statements appear in our lives? And by now, most people have written at least one. Right. And I think that we have to think about this in the context of health careers. So if you're going to apply to medical school, dental school, PA school, nursing school, whatever the allied health force that you're interested in, or the type of healthcare provider that you'd like to be, this is required. It's along the causal pathway. You've got to provide at least one. And throughout the course of your career, you might provide more than one. Now, if you're a person who's interested in applying for scholarships, you want to have somebody help, or you want to find resources to help you pay for your education, you need to also have one of these on hand. If you want to publish, if you're interested in getting recommendation letters from your mentors or someone else, they usually ask, can you send me or float me your bio or your personal statement? And so this is a quick way for you to have that kind of prepackaged material that you can send off in a very efficient way, get multiple either applications for scholarships, publications for your recommenders. And then finally, when you have speaking opportunities, right? Most of the time when I deliver a talk, they ask me, hey, do you have some type of information about yourself? Now, a full personal statement, as you get further in your careers, won't be necessary. But at this point, if you're ever going to be involved in something where they need to elicit information about you, they're going to default to a personal statement. So it has a bunch of uses. And I think that it's important for you to think about that as you prepare the statement. So we're back on that question, like, what is a personal statement? Why do we have it? And what purpose does it serve? I think that when there's a statement that says start with why. And I think that applies very broadly. So this statement has to address the question, why? Why do you want to do X? Why are you interested in X? So what makes you a good physician? Are you able to articulate that? Are you able to put that in a defined statement? How are you prepared for this occupation? How are you prepared for what you're asking to be brought into? These are the why questions that you need to be addressing in your statement. It can also be something that is extremely individualized, something that is tailored to your specific journey, your walk. It has to be yours. And so make sure that you're not adapting features from someone else's life or from what you've heard someone else say. Like, that does not align with what you've lived and what you've gone through. So make sure that the tailored elements are there. It includes self-reflection and personal experiences. It's kind of similar to what I just stated, but the self-reflection is really where you have to double down on, because to write something effectively that essentially grabs a reader, you've got to go inward. You have to figure out what those lived experiences were, those struggle points, those areas where you excelled. That requires you to reflect on your lived experiences. And also, it's deep, as I say, it's deep enough to draw the reader in, but it's focused enough to drive home a point. So don't get caught up in the artistry of expressing, some deep part of a journey without making sure that you're sending a message. The end message is, I want to do the why, right? Why I want to be a physician, why I want to go into this occupation. So you use those self-reflective portions and you make it very tailored to yourself in order to provide evidence and background for your why. I like this idea of narrative, right? There's so much power in owning your narrative because no one else has it. And as we look for physicians specifically, so I tend to speak about physicians. As we look for physicians or care providers, I'm sorry if you hear that in the background. I'm in a place where they're doing construction outside of my office. So as we start to look for physicians, right now, the more important thing is, what is that lived experience? What is that journey, that distance traveled? And part of that comes from having a narrative. So in building your narrative, understand that you've got to establish a baseline premise, right? A premise is a statement that you can create that articulates your why effectively, all right? So I'll say that again. Your premise is a statement that articulates your why. We talked about what a why was in the last slide. Well, that statement effectively gets that across. And I'll give you an example in a second. Then there's an anchor. The anchor is this leading characteristic or some part of you that makes you fit for being a physician. And then there's the pivot points. So premise, anchor, pivot points. Pivot points are all of those inflection areas throughout your life or throughout your experiences and journeys that led you to make a distinct decision and is directly related to why you're at where you are right now. So giving you an example of each of those, right? A premise could be something like saying, I believe that physicians have the ability to impact people's lives beyond the hospital. And because I care about service and because I care about service, my choice is to use medicine as a way to reach people and improve their lives, right? Very clear premise. An anchor would be like saying, throughout my career, I've been a servant leader. I've worked diligently to create resources for others. That's an anchor. It still fits with my why, and it tells me why I am apt for being a physician. And then the pivot points can be saying something like, I remember I was pursuing this particular type of a career, and then I encountered somebody who mentored me and I saw the way that they cherished every single patient. And that spoke to me. It resonated deeply. And I decided then that being a physician was the only way that I can recreate that feeling while still doing my purpose. Pivot points, anchor, premise, okay? So there's these concepts that I like to bring forward when we talk about narratives. And I commonly get questions from students when they ask me about writing. They're like, so how do I like talk about myself? Isn't that a little like, arrogant, or isn't that, will that be perceived negatively? And I'm like, well, it depends on how you do it, right? It depends on how you paint this picture. Because remember, you're the only expert. The reader does not know you and can't basically say, oh, you're not that good at this. Wait a minute, you left out this. The reader's not going to say those things. So you have to bring all of these pieces to the forefront. And I use these two terms, a soft flex and a hard flex, because essentially these are styles of sharing your strengths. So I have a couple definitions here. If you want to screenshot this, I think this might help you. But a soft flex is an indirect mention of your strength. A hard flex is a direct mention of your strength or your strengths. So I'll give you some examples, right? A soft flex would be like, if let's say the strength is, you are a good test taker, right? Let's say you're a very strong test taker. So a soft flex would, sorry, let me do the other way. I'll do the hard flex, then a soft flex. A hard flex would be like, throughout my career, I have worked diligently to perform well on exams. And to this point, I've been able to succeed with every exam taken. Like, that lets me know as a reader, like, okay, this person takes tests well. And that is important because as a physician, you will have a variety of exams. And it's a demonstration of your ability to show your fund of knowledge in a real situation, right? So that's the hard flex. Now, the soft flex would be like, throughout my career, I've worked to do service and manage my time effectively, so that every time that I had an assignment or a deadline, I was still able to complete my other responsibilities, as well as make, good marks on exams. Or I've been able to work diligently and have leadership. You're talking about other things that are not the direct fact that you also do well on tests. It's showing that I do well on tests, and because I do well on tests, I'm able to make time effectively and do these other things. So I think that the soft flex and hard flex, indirect mention, direct mention, can be played with a little bit. If you hard flex, say you're talking about leadership, right? Hard flex would be naming the role that you served. I was the recording secretary for the Black Student Union. Soft flex, I've consistently served in roles where I've been needed. And each time I come back and they've asked me to deliver more XYZ, right? So you're not saying that I'm a strong leader. It's the fact that people keep asking you to do it, right? And it's not saying the role, it's describing the feeling of being a leader. Acknowledge your weaknesses. So I'm gonna make this very clear. It is not a good idea in a personal statement to avoid a blatant weakness that may be visible somewhere else in your application, okay? It looks as though you are trying to hide it. It looks as though you are trying to somehow, divert the attention of the reader to all these other things, rather than saying like, hey, I'm owning this particular flaw that I'm working through, right? The main thing is you have to demonstrate that you've learned from the mistake. Okay. It's not enough to just say, I, perform poorly on standardized tests, right? The better way to say it would be to acknowledge that I've had, some hurdles taking exams, but in acknowledging that, I've gone through tutoring and I've become a peer tutor. And now I'm able to explain material a lot more confidently. You know what I mean? Like that's a way of saying I took my weakness and I converted it to something that is active, and I'm showing improvement. That is looked upon very favorably in this personal statement. Cool. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Okay. So there used to be a movie called Boomerang. I have to explain this a lot because they're like, who are these guys? I'm like, it's Eddie Murphy and John Witherspoon, an actor who's now deceased, but was very funny. And in this scene, he would talk about how he had to coordinate his clothes. So he's got on like a mushroom shirt, a mushroom belt. The lining of his jacket has like the mushroom pattern and everything, and he just coordinated everything. The reason why I like to share that is because I think of personal statements as an opportunity for you to layer and coordinate, right? It's this unique opportunity for you to brag upon yourself, but then use it as a tool and essentially echo those same points throughout other areas of your entire application package. And it's so cool because it's like a cheat sheet for yourself. Because if you're saying the same things in all these areas, one, the reader is going to feel like this got to be true, because it's evident in here, 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 and here. But also, you can play up the points that you really, really want to embellish. So, give you an example, right? If you're trying to show that you want to work in women's health, right? Let's say that's your thing. So in some area in your CV or in your resume, you've got that you shadowed an OBGYN. Then in your personal statement, you're writing about this experience working at a women's clinic and how you're creating materials around, STD awareness or maternal mortality or something like that, right? And then you get to the interview and they ask you a question about, what you want to do. And then you glow about how much you've learned in the space of women's health and reproductive health. Like all of these things echo one another. And that's the coordination that we're talking about, right? It shows two things. It shows one, that you have a clear direction and a body of work that you're building very loosely, but also it shows that there's a higher level of thinking about doing something. Now, obviously, it doesn't have to anchor around like an experience such as, shadowing a physician, but think about things, simple things like if you want to make leadership your calling card, or you want to make the fact that you are, a self-starter. Those are concepts that you can echo through multiple areas of your application package. So, as I told you, the movie is called Boomerang. So this idea of the boomerang effect comes out, right? And this is where all of the supporting arguments in your personal statement echo back upon the anchor or the premise, right? They all pivot back to that. So you think about, okay, I'm going to write this. At some point, this has to reconnect the reader with why I want to do what I want to do. And we'll see some examples of that in a second. You guys still with me? Give me a nod if you are. I like to look at the faces every night. All right, we're good. Perfect. Cool. So I have a couple of structures. These are like frameworks for you to learn how to write. Now, if you want to screenshot these, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that they're super helpful if you are not a person who's like, if you're not walking up here, J.K. Rowling, writing everything, you might need to have some insight. First one, prompt, statement, support, restate. Very straightforward. This is like the classical way we learn how to write things, right? Where they say you come up with your prompt. The prompt can usually be, some type of quick little quote or a lead-in anecdote or whatever. You can pick a quote. A lot of people use, folks in literature. I think more commonly it's been prominent folks who are either in politics or who speak in policy. So that might be a strong place to go for a quote or a lead-in anecdote. So the key to a lead-in anecdote is it cannot take up the majority of your writing. An anecdote has to be very quick, 3 sentences, and then you get to your statement. So the statement is an affirmative point that you're trying to make, right? It's very declarative. So a statement, as I said before, you could say something like, I aspire to be a physician who leads from the front through service, through whatever. You can come up with a very clear statement. Or I believe that my ability to work hard, to advocate for others, and demonstrate clinical excellence will make me a physician that other physicians would want their family members to go to. So very clear statement. So I can see 3 things there. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. The support for that statement appears in the body. So you're using 3 paragraphs or whatever to basically show the pillars of why that statement matters. And then at the end, you just recap, reiterate it. Very straightforward structure. You've been writing like this, honestly, since high school. And so, or since middle school, this is how we learned how to write. So I truly encourage folks, like if you are struggling with, a particular way to do this structure to me is the best brainstorm structure. All right, cool. Here's number 2. This is my personal favorite because I'm a sucker for stories. Setting, rise, climax, fall, resolution. Those 5 points. So anytime you've ever thought about a movie that you've loved to watch, any epic story, I am a big Marvel fan. I love Marvel movies. I feel like, No Way Home came out, and then we got in next week, this Doctor Strange joint's coming out. I will be present in the building. So this is where Marvel has literally changed. It's capitalized. It made literally billions of dollars doing this: setting, rise, climax, fall, resolution. Give you an example. Every single last one of them. Tony Stark comes through. Oh man, wait a minute. Billionaire playboy. What happens? He gets stolen. He's somewhere in a cave. All of a sudden, he gets a sense of purpose, becomes Iron Man, starts fighting people. Then all of a sudden, something happens. Now we got to defeat the enemy. And then at the end, joins Avengers. Setting, rise, climax, fall, resolution. You can go through every single last one of these movies. You can go through any Harry Potter, whatever. You guys get the picture. Like, this is how we develop a love for stories. Your life has the exact same thing. You can talk about being a physician in the exact same way. Major points here: be consistent, carry the storyline throughout. The minor points you're trying to make, they have to exist in the details of the story that you're sharing. Think about the rise climax part as where those details can really be inserted. The fall is that area where you can talk about your weaknesses. But the resolution is that Phoenix moment where, after you figured out what it was wrong, you came back to your why. It's that point of clarity. And as a reader, you're like naturally tapped into this because you've watched Marvel movies. You've watched the Harry Potter series. You've watched Lord of the Rings, and you love those things. So writing stories like this show 2 characteristics. 1, you must be a very skilled writer. 2, the way that you live your life is something that others will want to aspire to and model. And as physicians, when you're telling somebody, hey, I want you to take your medications, or hey, I want you to do this, they have to be relatable. I mean, the physician has to be relatable. And so these stories tend to be things that people anchor on. The point I want to make at the end is that this resolution answers the lingering question throughout, right? The lingering question throughout. So your lingering question is your why. So how does the resolution address the why? Here's the last one. 3 major qualities, give an example for each, and synthesize it. This is the classic, what they call it, spiderweb brainstorm. You start with your little circle joint, and then you put your 3 ideas, you put your little bullet points underneath, and then you figure out what the connective tissue is. The reason why this is so effective is because you got to think about the audience. If you're applying to med school, sometimes the readers don't want to go through a whole, epic tale in reading through your narrative. They're reading personal statement number 200. So sometimes they just want to get the actual meat and potatoes of a person. So how do you make this one very significant? That opening has to be on point. The opening is tight, very well articulated, goes through your major qualities, gives a little bit of context. The body provides specific examples of each quality. Usually you cite an experience or an evidence, right? You're going to give some type of reason why you think these qualities are important. And these are like usually lived experiences. And then you bring all the elements together and you create a uniform sentiment at the end that literally brings everybody. It's literally like they arrive at this grand idea that, oh, this is a person who is prepared to be in medical school. So focus on the qualities for this one. Very salient things. Don't say something like, a quality being like, I am humble. Like, that's not really something that I think would land well. But a quality like, I work well with peers, lands well, right? Because in the physician's world, you're going to have to talk with other people. You're going to have to talk to other consultants. You're going to have a relationship with nursing staff and everyone else. So I think that this is a part of developing really strong qualities that will literally, I guess, connect to your end goal of being a physician. Here are some pro tips before I switch it to my next one. I think that the main goal here is, if you're going to write a successful statement of yourself, you should find someone who's done one that you thought was pretty successful in their career or in their pathway, and then reference it. Ask them what they went through. What was their process? Okay. You can speak with other folks. Like every time someone says healthcare advisor, this is hit or miss. For some, the healthcare advisors may not be that helpful. But I will say that if you know someone who has served on an admissions committee, you can ask not what do you want, but you can say, what about the ones that you kept reading? What are the ones that were memorable for you? Those two questions, they will give very clear answers, and I actually expose what they're looking for by telling you that. Internet advice. I do not support this. I think that when you are listening to unvalidated information, it's really just, water cooler rumors, hearsay. Someone will tell you like, man, oh yeah, I heard that UC Davis is looking for statements that like, you're like, man, okay, get out of here. Who are you? Tad 327. I don't know who you are. You can't validate their this could be someone who's literally just trolling people on the internet. So don't listen to internet advice. And then read. I say read because the more you read, the better your ability to articulate yourself becomes. You learn phrases, you learn certain words like zeitgeist. You're like, I can work zeitgeist in there. You learn phrases. You're like, okay, a zero-sum game. Like you learn these phrases from reading things, and you can incorporate it into your personal statement. And the person who's reading is like, wow, this person's a little bit more elevated in terms of how they interpret things or how they articulate themselves. Really important pieces, and I'm going to kind of like zoom through these for the next one. Timeline. Start early. Make sure that you have a clear idea of how much time it takes to get this statement done. You got to make sure that each one of these checkpoints is met along the way. The major bottleneck for people is multiple drafts. So if you're a person who takes a long time to give feedback or to incorporate the feedback, account for that on the front end. Start earlier, right? You want to have the final draft ready essentially about a month before the submission deadline. And the reason is because if you have any last minute changes or something else comes up, you can modify it with ample time. The real thing is reaching out to people in advance saying, hey, I'm writing a personal statement. I want to know if you have time to take a look at it. Get your little playlist of people that you're going to run it by, and then make sure that they are committed to giving you good feedback. And don't be afraid to give them a clear, I need the feedback in a week. Are you cool with that? Perfect. All right. You get to control that. This is super important. All right. Don't ask for feedback if you can't handle what they're going to say. I remember I sent my first personal statement to a buddy. He was a law student. Man, it was so much red on this. It was literally Game of Thrones, red wedding on my page. This was the most tatted up piece of paper that statement I had ever received. And it made it better. It made it better. And so if you can't handle someone basically being like, this is constipated thinking, what do you mean by this? Run-on sentence, fragment, like if you can't handle someone doing that, then you might not want to submit that to them. But in all honesty, it can make your statement better. You don't have to take everybody's advice. You can actually decide what you're going to incorporate and what you don't. But at the end of the day, good feedback will challenge you to augment your paper. If anyone sends it back, it's like, yeah, this is great. They didn't care. They literally looked at it on their phone. And then that's what they did. They read through it. I was like, okay, I get it. No, you want someone who's going to really, really deconstruct your piece. I put a couple of examples of people who I know that tend to read things. Law school friends, poli-sci folks, English majors, religion, folks who have to read text and interpret it a lot. They are really good at this. And then also I would say, maybe the person that you asked to borrow their statement, they'll help. I usually go through examples, but I'll give these to you all to go through. Essentially, I want to just tell you what you would be looking for. There's an example that is not that strong, And there's an example that is strong a couple slides later. You all have availability to this, correct? I want you at some point after today to go through the weak example and the strong examples. It's not about length. It's about what's said. And you'll be able to tell that there's significant differences between the two. The main portion that I want you to keep your eyes focused on is this, right? The strong example shares a personal story, gives context, forms bridges between life and interest in medicine. Appropriate grammar is used. Spelling errors are eradicated. And it offers adequate support for that why. This is where people lose because they don't tend to make these things very clear. They rush, they forget a couple of these pieces. So make sure that you really emphasize that. All right, now I'm gonna take the time for these pitfalls. This is my favorite part of this presentation. Okay, I know everything inside of you wants to tell the story of the sick family member or the story that you were watching something on TV or an experience that was something that you saw that was dramatized and you're like, this made me want to be a doctor. I'm going to challenge you to think outside of the box there, right? Because in some situations, you have to think like, how many of these articles how many of these statements start the exact same way? You know, how many sick grandparents, how many sick parents? My sick parent rule, honestly, is if you're going to write about that sick parent, and if it is truly something that literally changed your entire, or a sick grandparent, and it changed your entire life structure, then yes, you write that because that is like pivotal to who you are. But if it's just like, you know, I had an auntie and I saw her deteriorate, and now all of a sudden I realized I wanted to be a doctor. It's like, how did that change your perspective? Was it just that you saw her, that she was sick? Or was it more so like you were involved directly in her care and you were seeing all of these things happen and it brought you closer to the space of medicine? You know what I mean? So you got to really figure out how you're going to play that narrative, because 1,000 people will write the exact same thing. I had a sick such and such, and now I want to be a doctor. That's not why you want to be a doctor, right? Errors. Y'all, we got spell check on everything now. And I know there are homophones that trick everybody. A homophone, I think, is the them, their, and theirs, right? Where all of them will show up as spelled correctly, but they're not used appropriately. Pay attention to that. So that's why you need someone with trained eyes to read it, because you'll look over that same statement, you know, same sentence 5 times, and won't even catch it. So you need someone who's like, oh, this is incorrect. Grammatical errors. So this is when you have a run-on sentence or a fragment. Yo, we got to pay attention to these, y'all. It makes our writing feel weaker, you know? Passive tone versus a strong tone. This is something that you learn from reading a lot of articles. When the tone of the author is something that comes out, you get a different feel, right? So rhetorical questions to me are not good in a personal statement. Your statement should be all affirmative. You're telling them declarative, I do this, I believe this, or I am this. But saying like, it is my belief that maybe I could, that is a passive tone. I don't believe you. So you can rephrase those same statements in a way that the reader is like, no, this is what it is. It's unequivocal. So write as though you are giving them decree, law, fact, pure, rationale, unadulterated. That's how you want your statement to come across. They should not read it and feel like this is a person who is unsure of the statement they just made. Improper vernacular. Y'all, I love saying that I'm Dr. Brown, but when I write, I'm not doctor, I'm a physician. So when I read a statement, they're like, I would love to be a doctor. I'm like, a doctor of what? Philosophy? A doctor of what? Education? If you want to be a physician, own that. But then also, the way that you write, this tone, you got to make sure that you're using words. Now, obviously, throwing in big words just to sound like you're educated it's essentially exposing a weakness, is that you believe that you are not that educated. And so you have to overcompensate. It's about creating dialect that is native to you. So you use words that you comfortably use, and you can make a very precise statement without throwing in extremely large words. So I like for the words to be precise, surgical. Think of everything landing in the right place, not necessarily I got to use this big word so that they understand that I have vocabulary. Lying, please don't lie. Don't build a narrative that you have to somehow now remember and keep up with all the different elements of it, because someone might ask you about it later and you don't remember what you did, because later in your at the point where you're doing a medical interview, you may not remember anything in your personal statement. So just tell unique, linear stories. And then late submission, right? So folks, I know I used to do this when I was the king of, I emailed you that already. It may have gone to your trash, so I'm gonna send it again. I understand those quick little things that you do when you know that you're behind a deadline. Greatest thing here is just don't submit it late. Make sure it's on time. And it comes from starting early enough and pressing people to give you those revisions. And if they can't give you the revision when you need it, you got to find someone else. Cool. This is a little exercise that I think you guys should do at home. Really remember those things I said: premise, anchor, pivot points, boomerang sentence, soft flex, hard flex. If you can write those things down now for yourself, I promise you, you'll have the basic ATGC of the DNA of a statement that's going to really land well. Here are your take home points, y'all. Tell your narrative as it relates to your interest in medicine. It's yours. You own it. Use the revision process to sculpt your statement. So again, think about the number of passes, number of people who need to see it, the quality of the people who see it, and take that feedback and incorporate the best feedback. Plan and time manage everything. It has to be strategic. Get this stuff done on time so you can just slide that in there and just forget about it. Submit, prepare for the interview. And that's where we're going next. All right. Cool. I'm gonna take a pause here. Cool. All right. Stoffel, did you want me to go to the next one, or you want to take the questions now?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's take, if there's a couple of quick questions that anyone has, please raise your hand, and Tracy and Carolyn, would you guys call them out? We'll take, how about 2 or 3 minutes worth of questions and answers, and then he needs to move to the second one. Second presentation. Anyone? Everybody's clear? I have one question.
We have one hand up.
Okay.
Erica Lang.
And Erica, could you be brief with your question to the point?
Hi, I'm Erica Lang. First, thank you for your presentation. It was super helpful. I'm actually a reapplicant. I'm applying this year again and taking the MCAT again. I did have a question regarding resubmitting a personal statement, especially if you've been denied admittance, if that's ever ideal. Do's and don'ts, pretty much.
I got you. First off, thank you, Erica. It's a pleasure to meet you. You're not alone. I reapplied multiple times. I did use my personal statement multiple times. And what I want to share with you is you need to figure out what they thought the weaknesses were in your application, right? If you figure out what those weaknesses are, then if any of them say the statement was weak, then you need to change the statement. But if they're not, the statement was fine, then why break it? It's working. I think that there's a way to emphasize other points. Now, if you want to revise your statement, I think that might be wise. If there's some other point that you want to now add, meaning hey, I've gone through this application cycle before and I've made these changes, that might land well, because the statement now speaks to this new feature of your experience, right? So I think that can work, but again, it's about time. If you have the time to do that, then do that. If you do not have the time to do that, just figure out if the statement was good or bad from someone who, proofread your application or whatever, and then move forward. Cool?
Okay, cool.
I see James in there. Hey, James, what's going on, brother?
Ms. Bello, we have one other hand raised, but did you want to move on?
I can answer. No, I can take that.
Okay.
Okay.
Eric, Arissa?
I got you.
Yes, thank you. My question is, kind of like a compound question. Like, what is the ideal length? And also, I know you said you wanted to kind of like own the personal statement and kind of make it pertaining to our life and our experiences. How can we write an engaging story without, at the same time getting to the point?
Got it.
We're trying to.
Got
So your
it.
question is about length and not getting lost in the narrative. Got it. So
Yes.
ideal length, they will tell you the character count, like very precisely. I use up to that last period. That's personal. If you're more effective at writing, great. But you're mostly going to find that you will write more and have to, redact a bunch. You're going to have to cut out a whole lot. The point is, your first draft, you write like you writing. Do not focus on character count. Your revision, your second count, that's when you start to trim back. There's a movie called Finding Forrester. It's one of my favorite. He talks about this. You write your first draft with your heart. You write your second draft with your mind, right? That first draft, you just write. The other piece I wanted to say was you'll know when it's the right length. You'll feel it. It's like if you're trying to put a key into a keyhole and then all of a sudden it fits and it clicks, you'll be like, oh, this is right. How do you keep from going too deep into different areas or getting lost? It starts with the planning, right? That brainstorm portion. When you identify the story or the narrative that you want to share, you need to think about the most salient features of that narrative. It's like, if you're taking too much time trying to set up this punchline or set up this impact point, then you're getting lost. So I streamline all the elements. They don't need to know the name of this person that you're trying to tell this story about. They don't need to know that, it was 6 to 8 months where you were going back and forth to the hospital doing this, and you need to be very clear and precise with what you're doing, right? And so that comes with using surgical language. And I don't mean language of a surgeon. I mean surgically, meaning very precision oriented. Okay.
Let me just add to that, Atala.
Go ahead.
I write a lot of grants. And one of the things I am telling you that works is, even because sometimes I've gotten to the point where, and like I see somebody say there's 5,300 character limits for the AAMC, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And I found sometimes I have gotten so good that if they give us 2,000 characters, I can get it down to 1,000. And so then I can go back and expand on an area that I think that they may want to, that should be expanded on, or that would be more interesting or make the statement better. So it's really, really important to do your outline and your first draft. Do an outline like bullet outline, like 1 sentence bullet outline. I mean, I'm really, really write a lot. And that's why we have you guys write that statement at the very beginning of your application. And some of you wrote amazing statements, but about 75% wrote something personal, like my grandmother was sick and that's why I decided to become a doctor, or my auntie, or I had a tumor, or whatever. You got to figure out how to expand that kind of dialogue. And that was one of the things I wanted you to address real quick, because about 85% of them, when you ask them the question, why do you want to become a doctor?
Right.
That's the question that they need to ask first. And the second is, what are some of the challenges that you have faced and overcome, and how did you overcome them? That question is going to be asked all the time. Those 2 questions.
I'll say this real fast, and then
Okay.
I'll jump into my next presentation. The reason
go right
why
ahead.
I tell people about the whole, like, if you had a personal illness that you want to use as your story, that's different. If it's your illness and you went through it, I think that is a decent thing to write about. But when you're writing about someone else's experience, you are borrowing a lot you're assuming a lot, and you're borrowing a lot, right? Like, that is their experience. That might be something that they have gone through and lived. And you are saying that I am an expert in what they went through, and because of that, it makes me want to be a doctor. That doesn't necessarily align, right? So unless it was like you had a parent that you ended up watching deteriorate, and that parent was something so significant to you, and they taught you everything you need to know, and it was the reason, like this was a turning point in your life where you decided you were doing bad, and this happened and you started doing well, like maybe that works. But in general, most people just say, I had a friend or I had someone who was sick and I watched them be sick and now I want to be a doctor. And when I read that, I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. So I'm just challenging you to be a little bit more like in depth with your reasons for your why, because it's not saying that that didn't influence you. It did. But is that why you want to be a doctor? No, it's not. So you got to get very particular. All right, cool. Let me jump into this next one. I think this is the one where most people have fun because we talk about interviews and how you are perceived. Cool.
Yes.
This presentation is called Conquering the Interview. We are speaking again with affirmative language. Conquer it, not how to do well on an interview. Sounds like you're unsure. You need to make sure that you know what you're doing. Okay, so for those that have not done an interview yet, or who have only done kind of like, preliminary type style interviews, here is a basic overview of what this interview is. Why an overview of what the interview is. This is the way that schools assess whether or not you are a good fit for their program. Okay. It serves two purposes, though. It's not just for the schools, it's also for the applicant. The applicant is using the interview as an opportunity to gauge whether or not the school is where they want to land, but it's also their opportunity to showcase how wonderful they are as an applicant. So twofold. School is looking at it and saying, all right, this is how I get a better idea of who wrote this stuff and who sent this application material in. But I also want them to know that our school is the best. The applicant is saying, all right, is it really the best? Show me what you got. But I'm also really that good. So this is the twofold, or the dichotomous nature of interviews. Know yourself, know your worth. This is something that we struggle with, particularly it speaks to sometimes our imposter syndrome that exists, but I want you all to put that inside of a drawer right now and really lean into this element. When you know who you are and you understand what your value is, it's easier for you to communicate that. And just because you're communicating it to someone who has, let's say, the ability to, change your career or life trajectory, it shouldn't make you any less comfortable in speaking about who you are and what you are worth. Okay. Part of it is having that very clear understanding, right? You know what your strengths are. You know what your weaknesses are. You're able to articulate your goals. You understand the values that you have and the things that make you tick. You know you're right and you're wrong. You have a good moral compass and your coping skills are intact. Knowing your application is highly important. As I told you before, when I was talking about layering and making sure that there's coordination, all these features build upon one another. So to be effective, you have to have a good idea of what your personal statement says, what your GPA and scores are, what your application materials reflect. And then the interview becomes about essentially pulling those things out of the sky and using it to convince the person in front of you that you're exactly who you said you were. With that, the negative parts that they are able to identify, whether it's because you gave them the negative points in a personal statement, or they can see it through, gaps in your application, they'll be like, all right, so I'm going to ask you about it. So just be prepared to provide rationale behind those things. This goes along with understanding that body of work. All right. I tend to tell people, if you're going to write, if you're going to have application materials, you need to make sure that they're up to date. And so for the young lady, I think her name was Erica, who was talking about going back in the reapplication cycle, this might be important for you. So update these things twice a year, just for good habits. I know for us, when we are in academic medicine, they tell us to update our CV literally like every quarter. I've moved to almost every month, going back and adding things. review this stuff and get feedback. So be very particular about the feedback process. You'll realize that success comes from getting multiple eyes on this and people who are dedicated, and you're essentially weaving them into your vision. Yo, we are trying to be a doctor, not me. We are trying to be a doctor. And because of that, I need your help. Access available resources. So find out, if your program or your school that you're currently at, or if you have, something that you've been, like a system like this has resources that are available for you to tap into. Resources meaning like folks who will be willing to read, mentors, other students, maybe a connection to an admissions committee person who has time and is able to talk to you about, these things and their expectations. Proofreading, we talked about that. I don't really have to reiterate. Look for the errors, and that's for everything. And then a CV and resume. Know the difference. Usually resume is a short one-page document. It's the most brief snapshot of who you are, whereas a CV is usually longer. It includes multiple publications, and everything that you've been able to create. Your entire body of work should be reflected in CV. All right. Your prospects. This is important for most folks at this juncture, because you're looking at it and you're like, all right, I don't really know where I'm going to be applying or how I'm going to be applying. I just want to apply. So I really challenge you to understand these 4 points here. Knowing the school, that means looking at the websites, looking at the mission statements, seeing what their curriculum style is like and how they grade, whether or not certain things are pass, fail, or actually letter grades. All of this is important. When do they start doing their rotations? Like, all of these features will give you an indication about the school's values. Okay. And even the cost. Use the available resources. There's a bunch of different things that are, at your fingertips that will show you all of these different features. And also, it's a philosophy thing, right? So allopathic versus osteopathic. Some people are will end up with MDs. Some will end up with DOs. Both, to me, are equally skillful. It's just about the philosophy of the practice. And then obviously there's other areas in healthcare, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing. Just understand the field. And then realize that you're not creating this as a plan B option. This is the plan A. This is the plan A. So here's the bread and butter, right? Folks have asked me constantly, like, what is the way to effectively interview? And it starts with preparation, right? You got to know from the beginning, I'm going to basically be on display from the moment I show up to the moment I finish. Now, the last time I gave this talk, I think there were no in-person interviews. So we were talking mostly about digital things. I think some in-person interviews have resumed. At least site visits have resumed. So I'll try to flex in between both. All right. So in preparation for the interview, know what you're going to wear. We're going to talk about this in depth in a couple of slides, because I feel that most of us have to have this talk so we understand the expectations of the interviewer and the system of medicine. Be aware of your habits. Are you I know that I say so. I sometimes also say, a lot. So those are my habits when I'm interviewing. I try to basically calm those down. Some other people twist their hair, might bite their lip, nails. Just be clear of those different habits and try to front load to reduce the distraction of them. Eat well. Worst feeling is when you're sitting in an interview and your stomach start doing jumping jacks. You really don't want to have that weighing on you. I promise it's uncomfortable. You look uncomfortable. The interviewer will be like, this person's uncomfortable. Bring a snack. I've been in an interview before where someone was like, hey, I'm so sorry. I need to eat or I'm gonna pass out. And I was like, yes, please eat now. Like, have this. And it didn't make me feel any type of way. I actually remembered them when they were my resident. And I talked about it all the time. And we joked about it, but they ended up being my resident. You see what I mean? So don't be ashamed. I'm not saying bring like a meal, but I'm saying, like, if you are at the point of starvation in between your interviews, you might need to take a snack. Select convenient travel times. If you're going to physically go somewhere, I tell the people fly the day before. Don't fly in and go straight to an interview. That recipe for disaster, because if anything goes wrong with that flight, you're going to miss the interview. Get rest, sleep. Don't spend up the night. Don't stay the night before, up talking on the phone, trying to watch your little last series or whatever, watching Ozark. I don't care. Go to sleep. Just shut it down. All right, y'all. I'm going to have to put my screen on for this portion because I realize I got to see faces to really, really get into this. All right. Now, let me first say that we are all family here. Even though y'all just met me, I am coming from a place of love, and I'm coming from a place of I want you all to succeed. And I am also going to state this. There may be individuals who are transgender, so please understand that I am not using this as a constrictive term. If you identify with either one of those, feel free to adapt that information. Cool? All right. So generally, if you identify as a man and you're going on an interview, it starts with this suit. All right. The joke of say power suit, power tie, power moves, whatever. That's a little bit much. But in medicine, it's still pretty traditional. So we're looking for the applicants to be presentable. I tend to tell people, stick with certain colors on the suits. No one wants to see you come through in the mauve, nice baby blue suit. Like, that's not the time for this. We have 3 colors to play with, guys. Blue, charcoal, black. That is our field. Blue, charcoal, black. Sometimes you can do a little bit of patterns on them, but realize that it should not be distracting. I typically tell people a nice dark blue suit will work with anything you got on. And it's subdued enough to where you can still accent the things that matter. Shoes. Now, obviously, if you're doing Zoom interviews, this doesn't matter. You can have on house slippers. You may not have to have on a full suit, but the upper portion needs to be visible. If you are wearing shoes and you're in an in-person interview, dark shoes is really the standard. Brown or black shoes, I think that's pretty straightforward. Different hues of the brown, just realize that as you get a lighter tone, those cognac, lighter browns, it also looks a little more flashy and it may be distracting to the interviewer. Personal anecdote, I went on a medical school on a residency interview, and this guy in Chicago was so enamored with my shoes. He literally brought me around to other people. Like, look at his shoes. And I was like, all right, so he clearly doesn't like me. I knew right then and there I wasn't gonna match there. And it was like, all right, the shoes did it for him. It took the attention off of me as a person and put it on my shoes. So I just encourage you all to think very streamlined for this. Shirts. All right. I am a big fan of just, if your suit is dark, your shirt is light. If your suit is dark, your shirt is light. If you're wearing a dark colored shirt and your suit is dark, you're in the matrix. I need you to not be there. I need you to come back. Okay. Just telling you straight up. And also like really distracting colors, a pale pink, a pale blue, a pale lavender, a white. Those are great options. If you're doing like a very fine check, something that's not distracting, that's fine. Very fine stripe, that's cool. But if these stripes are very bold with very wide wales, meaning like the width of the stripe is very wide, it's going to be distracting. All right. Ties. All right. Here's a big thing. Some folks are huge bow tie fans. This is really where my point of differences. Depends on the specialty, depends on where you're interviewing. If the culture of the place that you're going is typically a little bit less conservative, bow ties can land well. I steer clear of them because it gives off this idea of that you're arrogant or pompous. That's what a lot of people believe, or that you're like overly, self-absorbed. I don't think that that's the case for the men that I know that wear bow ties. They just prefer fashion. But if it works with your personality and everything else, I think that sometimes bow ties land well. Generally, a long tie with a tie bar and making it very solid, like a knit tie works well, a striped tie, but not too many crazy colors. Please leave all those, festive themed ties in the drawer. But if you are actually like, okay, I have a tie that's got multiple colors, just stick to no more than like 2 colors, 2 to 3. And when I say 2 to 3, I mean if there's a base color and then the repeating thing has 2 colors, that's okay. But generally solid tie, just fine. And then the watches are very important. I think if you're in person, they can see that you have a watch. Is an error. It's one of the few things that men can wear jewelry wise, other than a ring for marriage, that I think are pretty well received. I mentioned the tie bar earlier. I just think that that is a great way to accent your tie, but also keep it from flapping around. So function and fashion. Cool. All right. To those who identify as women, I would like to give you all my very humble recommendations. I've never had to go on an interview with a woman, and I understand that this process is often brings a lot of stress. In more detail, so guys, those who identify as men, you got to take a back seat right now. We're going to have this conversation, but feel free to listen and share the information. All right. Business suit, a blazer, and a trouser or below the knee skirt are like the general standards for you going on an interview. Color wise, you've got a little bit of flexibility. Okay. I tell folks, sticking with charcoals, blacks, blues, or browns is usually customary, but I've seen some women pull other colors off that look really good. So just be tasteful. I wouldn't go with the crazy hot pinks. I would just look at it and say, how can I be as subdued, and think about the character of the place that you're interviewing. Another thing that I've seen a lot lately now is some infusion of a cultural element. So I'll leave that to you. I just wouldn't wear the complete garb unless that is your actual religion or practice. Sometimes I think that lands well too, because now it's a little bit more acceptable, but you got to be very careful not to be distracting or to stand out in a negative way. Shirts. I think smart colors work here. I've seen everything from, the variants of white, the pale this, blues. I've seen dark on dark that work fine too. I've seen like literally someone do all similar tones and it was just very elegant. I think that's really the lane, is how do you make that shirt, again, not a distraction, but also demonstrate your character and a little sartorial knowledge. That's fine. Accessories. Here is where I draw a hard line. All right. I don't think that having all your best pieces on at once is a cool thing. I think that is a tacky fashion statement. I also feel as though when you've got something that is unique about you, making multiple things unique at the same time makes you actually not look unique at all. It makes you look very contrived. So here's one thing I remember. There was a woman that was in my medical school. She wore a different frame for her glasses every single day. It was really cool. But it wasn't like she was wearing a different frame and a big old amulet necklace and then bracelets and bangles and earrings. She wasn't wearing all that. It was just like the one thing that she kind of adjusted consistently. So pick what you're going to do and do that well. Here are some pieces that I think I've listed that I tend to see used a lot during the interview process. Pearl necklaces or nice little tennis bracelet or thin necklaces, the simple watch, the nice, thin streamlined watch, a lapel pin here or there. Sometimes the earrings are really subdued, nice little diamond, nice pearl, whatnot, but not your huge hoops or the bamboo joints. Yeah, I'll leave those at the house. Okay. All right. And now some of y'all are mad as hell at me right now. And I know, I just want you to realize you can wear all of those things, just not in the interview. You can wear them as soon as you leave. But in the interview, you're drawing the focus to you. All right. Hosiery. Again, plus or minus, honestly, at this point, I think that it's kind of how were you raised thing. Some women wear hosiery with everything. Some women are like, you know what, I shave my legs, I'll be fine, or I don't shave my legs, they ain't gonna look. If you're on a Zoom interview, obviously it does not matter. Short for your shoes. The short heels, I think, are the way to go. You don't have to wear heels anymore. Like a lot of people wear flats on the interviews because you walking all over the place. It makes sense to me. Just the main thing for me is the 6-inch heels can't come out on this. They got to stay at the house. When I say at the house, I mean in the closet, like nowhere near the interview site. Leave them out of the bag. All right. There's a time and place for those. When you're trying to get this job, it is not the time or the place. Cool. All right. Here are the gray areas, y'all. This is where I get the question, but what about if all right, I'm gonna just kind of clear some of this stuff up. Belts, match shoes. Just basic thing that I learned. If you black shoes, black belt. Okay. Stay away from white socks or extremely light colored socks. It just makes you look like Michael Jackson. It's tacky, it's weird. Don't do it unless you are playing basketball. Your hair shouldn't be a distraction, and I say this very confidently as a brother who's had locks and done all my interviews with locks. I try to keep my hair as clean as possible. Now, just like anyone else who has natural hair, I have very bad hair days. I've had days where the fuzzies was creeping up out and something was untwisted a little bit. I tried to tack it down. It didn't work that well. Something's doing its own thing. Locks, they tend to do that. But when I'm in an interview, every single time, clean. Facial hair, I make sure that that's also trimmed up. You can't be on the interview trail looking like Anthony Hamilton. Piercings. So a lot of different little things that people are doing now. They got I forgot what this is called, but the bull ring middle of they got that joint. They got nose, eyebrows, ears, tongue, lip, cheeks. All of that stuff exists. As much as it goes in, I think it can also be removed. Just don't get the piercing, then go to the interview, because then you're going to essentially have the hole closed. Piercings that are usually appropriate. I've started to see more nose rings, like just the nostril, but not the hoop, just a little, Tupac nose ring. Like, just make sure that it is very, very subdued. And it does look elegant to a degree. Most people will tell you, if you can take it out, take it out. So that's the stuff that you can take out, take out. We already talked about earrings. Obviously, if you got the earrings all around here, I'm going to look at it. You're doing what I'm asking you to not do, which is you're drawing attention to other things than just you. Let me talk about natural. Is it on this one or the next one? Oh, sorry. Just want to quickly emphasize this about natural hairstyles. I love natural hairstyles. I think that and hair color and all those other things. My main point is, if you are creating all of this and it does not frame your face, and I'm not like on a Zoom, if it is more hair than your actual face, that's a problem. You want to have your face remembered. You want to have them remember who this person is, not who the hair is, because that is an extension of you, but they need to meet you first. So think about that. Makeup, main thing is eyelashes now. Eyelashes, people going crazy with eyelashes. All right, here's the thing. I know that this is a part of culture now. So when I see someone with lashes, I'm like, oh, she got all lashes. But if they are the ones that are like this, that is a distraction. The Venus flytrap, you got to, not this time. But the smaller ones, if they're extensions, it's fine. It embellishes. I'm okay with that. Tattoos. I get a lot of questions about tattoos. Facial tattoos, just recognize that you're going to go, this is a life of scrutiny. If you choose to get a facial tattoo, you live with it. Neck tattoos, obviously, depending on where they're located, it may be not visible. You can use like foundation and all this other stuff to cover it up. A lot of people know these techniques by now, how to like blend in their tattoos if they need to be. So that's cool. The ones that I tell people usually you're not worried about are like hand tattoos now. Like, people don't really care as much as they once did. I got guys in my emergency department and women as well who got tats all up and down here. So Can you intubate this patient? You can, great. But in the interview process, just realize that people form judgments based upon these things as well. Cool. So we went through the hardest part, y'all. That was, and I know there's like 1,000 questions about it, but I'm going to get through this portion now. And
Tell them, don't forget the beards.
Oh, well, I told guys, don't walk through here looking like Anthony Hamilton. That was the very clear part for me. I will rephrase one thing about beards. Okay, so some beards have cultural element, right? Obviously, there's some folks who have like the, Philadelphia beards, the, Freeway, Rick Ross, whatever. You can be clean. You can have a beard and be clean. I know several doctors that are like that. The main thing is have a specific conversation with your barber or your manicurist or your whatever, or your stylist, and say, listen, I need this job. So what we've been doing before, I need you to do something more elite. I need you to make sure that all of this is shaped up. The edges look like someone came with a protractor and did this. I need that level of care, because if it looks tacky, if it looks distracting, I might be someone that's singled out, and not in a good way. If you have patchy facial hair, just go on and let it go, dog. Just go ahead and just get it cut off. And there are women that have facial hair too. So I'm telling you that if you are doing this for intention, just, let it be there, tell them, or clean it up. If it is unintentional facial hair, there's a bunch of different ways for you to address that. I just continue to say, like, focus on trying to bring who you are forward and present your best self every single time. And sometimes that means you need to go ahead and get cleaned up a little bit. Cool.
There's a question. Oh yeah, what about nails for women?
Nails. So I usually go through that as well. So here's the thing with nails. Nails are they're in a way people express themselves. I just want you to realize that you can do all of those things the very next day, the very next week. But when you are actively trying to seek a job, it might not be the best time for you to have the claws or the colors with the thing and the third nail with the star here. Like some of that stuff you can leave out just for this one occasion. You can literally treat yourself after you kill the interview. Like, I'm gonna treat myself and go get some new nails. It's fine. It's one day. So just really think about that. Now, the one counterpoint that people have made in previous sessions is like, what if this is who I am? I want them to accept me as this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. You want to show them that I'm coming like this regardless. If you do that, choose to accept what comes with it. That may be you're not going to end up at that place. You came in as who you wanted to be, and they were like, we don't want that. So it might be a negative. You can sleep well at night though. So I'm just telling you, I'm not suggesting you comport yourself into an image that is not you. I'm saying that you own and can choose how you want to be perceived. You can choose today, I want to do this, tomorrow I want to do that. Like today I chose to pull my hair back. If you see me on social media, sometimes my hair is up in a bun. Sometimes my hair is straight down. I chose that. The persons that I'm interviewing with or the persons that I'm dealing with today did not select that. I had control. So just like I had control of that, you have control over whether you want to do this today or not. Cool. All right. I'm going to go through some more of this stuff. Stefana, is it okay if I go to about maybe 10 after, max?
Yes, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
All right. I've got a bunch of phrases here. These phrases, I don't have to go through each one of them. You've already seen and heard this stuff. If I'm an interviewer, I want you to reflect some of these things. A couple that stand out to me the most, I just want you to be determined. I want to make sure that you understand what you're doing, that you're confident in it, that you are able to speak and communicate with a level of ease. Like these things stand out in an interview. Obviously, motivation is something that you can tell as well, if someone wants to be there or not. Ooh, man. So sometimes this stuff happens. I don't know if this is still occurring, in the setting of the phase of the pandemic we're in right now. Some of this may be returning. if you go to a place for an interview, they may have a series of things you can do leading up to the interview or the morning of the interview. Take advantage of those things. If they take you on a tour, go look at stuff, talk to students, ask the questions. My biggest thing for folks who are doing like in-person stuff is get their contact information and then ask them the really grueling questions later. Don't in the middle of the interview be like, yeah, so do you really like to be here? No, like what you think they're gonna say? Yes, I love it here, because they have to put on their best hat and shoes or whatever for this for the fact that they're representing their institution. But if you want to get those more nuanced things, ask for their contact information. Say, hey, can I reach out to you via email or via phone call just with some follow-ups? And they'll be like, oh yeah, sure, love to talk to you. Cool. All right. The interview itself, it's usually now shorter. Before, they used to have 1,000. Let me rephrase. Depending on the style, you can expect on average at least 2 interviews, maybe 3. They're typically focused on one person from the faculty or an administrator, some type of a student interview, and maybe a group setting or interview. This is focused interview. I'm not talking about the time where you're constantly interacting with people who are a part of this interview day, because that is also an interview, but it's not the target focused. It's not the target focused part. When you're responding to interview questions, just try to be very strategic. Try to be very targeted. We can tell when you are searching for an answer. So take a second before you respond, think the question through, then say it. Avoid always pivoting your questions to like you. I think that you can answer questions very objectively without sounding self-centered. The question can be like, tell me your greatest quality, right? The question sounds like it's very self-centered. I mean, very, very focused on you, but instead of being like, I have a bunch of great qualities, the 3 that stand out the most, man, there are these things, but I mean, honestly, there's like a couple other things I want to talk, like that sounds like you're self-absorbed. But if you can say loyalty, I'm loyal to the people that communication, I love to interact with individuals and use language as a tool to bridge gaps. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like that's very, very direct, and it doesn't sound self-centered. Turn weaknesses into positives. We kind of talked about this in the personal statement segment, so just adapt some of that. The main difference is it's easier to do in writing because you have time to kind of pick this up. But for the interview, you have a cheat sheet because you've already done this in a personal statement. So someone might ask you that question, oh, so what do you think is a weakness? Or I noticed that you had this and the other. So how did you address that? You've already answered this question. So you just borrow the answer from something you've written and just change the words around. Many interviews. So this is when it feels like you're coming from every direction, right? You have a couple of different ways. Sometimes these people do the mini interviews now. They put you in one Zoom room and then people rotate inside the room, or multiple people rotate in the room at the same time. So you look up, you got 3 people in the room, they're all asking you one question. Here's the key. When you're having these interviews, I think that the main goal is focus on your points. Answer their question, but have the points that you're trying to drive home already locked and loaded. And so no matter what they ask me, I'm going to directly respond, but then I'm going to add my point, because there's still going to be other people taking notice of things about that question. They're looking at your nonverbal and verbal cues. They're looking to see how you deal with pressure. That's what they're really seeking. That is 2 observers and 1 questioner, or 1 person asking the question. Anytime you're in a multiple person interview, there's more people observing than people actually interacting with you on that question. So just think about the visual and the optics of it. And then also, it gives you multiple passes. You answer one question really kind of like in a struggle. The next one, you get a chance to do it again. So I think that that's super helpful. I have a basic list of some questions that will be asked. Obviously, this will be somewhat helpful, but I think that there's more. the real thing here is, most of the questions they're going to ask already. There's 1,000 documents that'll show you, oh, these are interview questions. Here are the things that I most want you to think about now. I feel like now everybody is asking some question either about, some global health related question in the setting of a pandemic. You're going to hear somebody ask questions about like large scale health intervention. So you should be aware of how health is affecting people at a global level. There's also going to be some question probably about diversity, because that is the new, hot topic in medicine. So expect there to be some question around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think that those are things you can front load. Here's the part that I think is valuable. You get the chance to ask them questions too, usually at the end. And when you ask those questions, don't let it be a wasted opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes people would look at that and be like, I have no questions. And they just want to end the interview because they feel like the interview wasn't that great, or they're anxious or whatever. Oh no, that's my favorite part of the interview, is after I get through all of this stuff, you've already formed your judgment about me. Now I get to extract information from you, and I get to put you in the hot seat. So part of my questions I automatically ask are like things that I want to know, that's going to make me, that I want to know the make or break things about the institution. And if they don't have great answers, then I'm like, they're sitting in front of me putting on a show too. So think about those questions. I have a couple here that usually help. I think the one that I'm starting to ask more commonly now is like, what is your, can you tell me what your, personal or institutional commitment is to issues of health equity or diversity, equity, inclusion, like something that's important to me. If you can talk about research, you can say, hey, how much, do you know what the funding scenarios are like for people that are interested in doing research for this? Like, you can ask very specific questions, but don't make it something that doesn't help you decide if you want to go there or not, right? Or here's the other part. If you can Google that answer, don't ask it. You know what I mean? Like, if it's something that you can just quickly flip through their, website and get, it's going to make it sound like you just being redundant, or you didn't do your homework. So I would ask very targeted questions that would help make or break my decision, and something that I think would be collateral information for me to use in a subsequent interview. Here's a little activity. I encourage people to try this on at some point. Really, what I do usually for this portion, or not today, but you can do a mock interview. You can turn with a friend. You can practice this stuff. Really, that's what makes you comfortable. Have somebody act as though they are interviewing you, asking you tough questions, keeping an account of time. Your answer should be between 1 to 2 minutes max, and that'll help you from wandering. But getting these repetition, this is what the reps in is important. And so I usually tell folks, if you see a mock interview activity or something you can sign up for through an organization, like, we're doing mock interviews for medical school or mock interviews for whatever, that is something you want to be at. You get the chance to work with people who do this for real, and you don't lose anything. You know what I mean? It's like, it's an opportunity to get better. So lean into those. My last slide of this deck is this. It stands true now. It's not the same numbers. The left column talks about, now I got to break this down for y'all, because, at some point you're just going to be talking about data. It's two different, this is from a study that was done by the AAMC. It essentially shows the ranked level of certain qualities and characteristics. The left column says, for the people that got invited for interviews, this was the rank and priority of the particular metrics involved. So to get an interview, the thing that they valued the most was GPA and MCAT scores, then letters of recommendation. All of these had very high levels of priority. You can tell by the number that they added there. It's like a factored number. Very low on the list was experiences with underserved populations, community service, stuff like that. I think it's shifted a little bit, where those have now kind of bumped up, but I still think that the top 1 and 2 thing are going to be GPA, MCAT scores, and then recommendation letters. But look at the acceptances column. The thing that was ranked the highest was the interview. Okay. So based upon the interview and what was said in the interview, the candidate may have shot past another person with stronger scores or with more service activities or with a better personal statement. All of that stuff relatively didn't matter when it came down to how well they performed on the interview. So this is why you've got to take the time to really get good at this stuff, because on most, and this is just not in this field, this is in most situations in life, that interview seals the deal. All right. Here's the take home points. I say, stop trying to be a good interviewer and instead work on being a better communicator in natural everyday conversation. I cannot say that enough. Just work on in your day-to-day conversations with people. Practice these same skills. If you haven't noticed, like the reasons why I do these lectures sometimes is because I'm trying to become a better communicator. My goal today in talking to you all was to be as personable as possible and to try to remove as many fillers and stutter points as I usually have. Those are my things, my flaws. I give lectures. Sometimes I stutter. Sometimes I, have a filler point. That's what I worked on today. But this is regular conversation for me. And so you can do the same thing. Articulate your words. Be very clear. Be very precise. Take your time. It's up to you. You basically dictate the speed of that interview and the speed of what you're saying. Build stories to express your points. I told you guys a couple of things throughout this interview process. I told you the story about, when a man made fun of my shoes. I had the Anthony Hamilton reference already loaded. I know these things. It helps to bring this stuff to life. But you can use those same skill sets in an interview. All right. Laugh. Here's the funny thing about laughing. When you laugh, sometimes there's an awkward laugh. I've had an awkward laugh too. But when you laugh, it lightens the mood. It automatically lightens the mood. You naturally can smile when you laugh. And so the person interviewing you, they see a side of you that doesn't show up on a page because you can't tell a laugh from writing. You can't tell personality from writing all the time. So don't be afraid to laugh, especially if you're uncomfortable. But don't be like straight up falling out the chair laughing. It ain't that funny. And then practice daily. Just get these reps in, y'all. Cool. I'm gonna stop right here. I think I got enough.
Okay. Okay, I tell that, Dr. Brown, that was great. I'm sorry, I've been laughing and enjoying this, and I hope everyone else has. There's a question I see, but one of the comments was, how do they reach you? Do you mind sharing an email or some contact information?
Sure, yes.
And I know you guys listen to me. He gets so many emails with personal statements. You guys practice, if you're going to send them to him, please try to make a good draft of what you really want him to review. Please don't send him your first take because in the past he's gotten 30 and 40 personal statements, and it was obvious some of those need to be reworked before they ask someone to look at them. So just remember that. And okay, I'll give it back to you, Dr. Brown. I just wanted to bring that up. Okay.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I usually get requests to read personal statements. I personally have moved from reading, if you're an undergraduate medical applicant, meaning like if you're someone who's applying for medical school, I usually don't read them. I can advise for someone to read or give you some examples. But I focus on folks who are in medical school trying to get into residency now. And it's because of where I'm at in my career. There's different things that are needing to be said for them. And I honestly think that there's under attention in that area. So just being completely transparent, I usually don't do undergraduate going to medical school. What I will say again is, if you are looking for an example, I'm happy to send what I had. You don't have to use it. And I also am happy to share with you parts from my slide deck if there's anything that's super helpful.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? I think this has been amazingly informative. And yeah, I can see the chat come popping up. I'm sure you can see it. Thank you, Dr. Brown. I know you are in what, Baltimore at a
No, 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 no,
conference?
no, 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 no. I'm back in California now. I
You're
flew
back in
back and I'm
California.
getting ready to
Okay,
go to
all
work.
right. All right. But again, you guys, this is a great, I can't emphasize that not only Dr. Brown, but the people at PMF and some of the other speakers, it is very important if you're sending them your personal statement or you've met someone and you had a dialogue and you're asking for a letter, that you really, really make it a good ask, that you've done your homework, that you practice your personal statement, and you got somebody that's got common sense that you know, or even if you don't know, maybe you can find someone that's common sense and can review it, or that's a good reader. It's important because once you get to the folks who have been at these presentations, they're the real deal. So you want them to review your statement, your interview, your input. You want them to give it to you towards after you have really gone through it. Okay. So not just sending that stuff to them. Okay.
Stephen, I have Erica Lang has a question.
Okay, Erica.
Fine? Okay.
I could do this
Hi,
question.
me again. I was just wondering, is there anything that we should bring to an interview if we are granted one?
Main thing that I would bring, as I said, I had food on there, like bring a snack. I don't believe in the whole like bring a gift for the interviewer,
Right.
or I actually don't even believe in sending thank you, to everybody that interviewed you on the day. I think that a one thank you email to the administrator goes a long way. Like who sent out the invitations and the information? That person needs a thank you, but that doctor that you talked to, they're not going to care. They're not. I'm just being honest. They're gonna be like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Erica. Dana, I know you. I see Dana, one of your project coordinators, is online. Do you have something real quick that you want to add to this? Because I know you're going through this process.
Yeah, I would echo everything Dr. Brown said. I mean, there are a million personal statements out there about talking about family members. I went through those iterations. I wrote about my family members. I rewrote it and wrote it again. Start early. Applications aren't due for a few months, but I honestly started writing mine in December. So start early and send it to folks. Give them enough time to give you feedback. And be unique and just find a story that stands out. You might think it's small, but you can take that and run with it just to show who you are.
Okay, all right. Dr. Brown, any closing remarks? Is he there? Okay. I think he is up.
He may be checking out. He is still online.
I'm sorry, I got a call from.
Okay, all right, he's still, all right. You can, when you're ready, just log back in. Okay.
Yeah, I got a call from the hospital. Give me one sec.
Okay. If anybody has any closing remarks you have, Dr. Brown, otherwise we know you have to run to ER.
He's just taking a call from the hospital and we'll be
Okay,
right.
I couldn't hear that. Okay.
Can you see me or hear me?
Yeah, Lemmy. Okay, yes, Lemmy. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just until he comes back, I feel like that one of the last slides he showed where like post interview, the acceptances and how much the interview can like make an impact, I think really speaks volumes to us and just shows you that, if you get the interview, it was for a reason. And at that point, like, don't doubt yourself, know the things that you've done and how amazing they are. Be able to speak to those and like just present yourself well during the interview. And that really takes you a long way. So, whatever MCAT score you had, whatever GPA you had, can all be overshadowed by your interview and like how well you do on that.
Let me just add to what Lemmy just said. Lemmy was now at UCLA School of Medicine. I think you were also admitted to USC School of Medicine. She's the first year. And she worked for many years with PMF, and just we're so proud of her. But one of the things that I want to also, as a tip from somebody who's done a lot of interviews and read a lot of personal statements, formulate your questions well. Don't drag your questions out for whatever. Just understand how to ask your questions. It speaks to your being able to critical thinking. It speaks to you being able to express it. That is very, very important, especially if you're in an interview and you have a question. Make sure that you practice it before you ask it at that interview. Okay.
I'm so sorry. Like I said, I got a call from the hospital.
No problem.
But,
No problem. No
yeah,
problem.
I didn't get to hear the questions.
Oh, we just wanted to know if you had any more additional statements, unless somebody else's hand is up. Okay.
No hands are raised.
Okay. If you have anything else you would like to add.
No, just really practice this stuff. If you get these skill sets down now, they literally translate later in life. I think that any one of these things can be reworked. I'm not saying the personal statement per se, but the way that you like conceptually understand that. And then for interview skills, you'll be interviewing for things for the rest of your life, and whether you know it consciously or not. So just kind of taking those tenets and moving forward with them is going to benefit you in the long run.
Thank you, Dr. Otalo Brown. You have delivered again in the most amazing, informative ways. Let's give him a big round of applause. We know you got all your patience. Thank you again, and we so appreciate it. Okay?
No problem, y'all.
Okay.
Y'all have a good day, okay?
Okay. Everybody, hold on. We got a couple of quick things. Thank you again, and we'll be in touch. Okay? I know that was a lot of information, and if you have some additional questions, you can either send it in an email or try to get to us, and even me, and I will try to either get you an answer, but try to make it clear so I don't have to back and forth texting, or not texting, but emailing. Okay. Okay, so with that said, we are going to end a little bit early today, but I have some very, very important announcements.
And before you do that, the project coordinators are want to come on to make some announcements as well.
Oh yeah, we're gonna, and that was part of what I was gonna include. Tracy? Okay, got it. Okay. So the first thing is that we did a tip sheet on the community, which is sort of an update of the Communications 101 workshop that we had, I think it was last weekend. So we'll be emailing that out. I want to remind you guys that a lot of the things that he discussed and the others did not discuss, but it will impact you when you apply or when you submit your request or your ask or your interviews. So we'll be sending that out. So be sure to download and keep it and review it well. It should be very, very helpful. The team projects originally were due on May 7th. They are now, we're going to give you an extra day, so May 8th, which is a Sunday, because we need time to review, PMF and its partners need time to review your team project and then select the winner, and then everybody else will be a runner-up. No one is a loser. You are a runner-up, okay, if your project is not selected, so keep that in mind. The special gift, we are still working on it. We may discuss it with the winning team before we make the final decision. So there may be a lag before you receive it, but we want to discuss it because we have a couple of ideas and different people are in different parts of the country. So we want to make sure that, we give you something that you want, that you really can use, if that makes sense, okay? Wanted to announce again that we will be sending out evaluations, and we really would appreciate if you guys would get them back to us next week. It's really important because our funders asked for it. They will be blind, so we won't know who did what, okay? We'll just take them and print them out and who said what. So we just ask that you get them back to us as soon as possible next week once you receive them. The other thing is, again, this is the part I wanted to announce. Dr. Brooks, who is the president, he was on, but he had to run to another meeting. But I wanted to acknowledge a couple of people. First, I want to acknowledge and everybody. Let's please give our virtual coordinators a big round of applause. Tracy Broadhead Frith and Carolyn Washington. They've done an amazing job. Thank you. In addition, Devana is the one that once you send in your applications, I don't know if she's on yet. Devana Hayes is the one that reviews them and puts them in a database. And that was quite challenging, but she got it all. And thank you, Devana. We want to, of course, thank our board of directors, and you met them all. All of them have been on at one point. And then there's another one, Dr. Thurman Hunt, who's an anesthesiologist. He and his wife, who is a dermatologist, will be, they will be the moderators for and speaking for the parent workshop. So many of you are going to be in project coordinator meetings, but I guess if you wanted to join the parent workshop, I don't know if you can do that. We have to ask Tracy and Carolyn, okay? And then the parent,
They can,
what do
join, they can join if they are not in meetings with their project groups.
okay, you guys got that, okay? And then of course the parent workshop starts at what, 1:30, I think it is?
At 1:30.
At 1:30, okay? So are there any questions that anyone else has? Because we are coming to a close for the Doctors on Board program. Can you all turn on your cameras? Because Carolyn loves to have one great big snapshot. And while you're doing that, I want to acknowledge our wonderful project coordinators. Lemi Ahmed, who is a medical student, first year at UC LA School of Medicine. Stephanie Lawless, who is a post-bac student at Cal State East Bay. Damon Rogers, who I think is a post-bac student at Sac State or UC Davis, I forget. Sac State?
It was UC Davis, but I graduated
UC Davis,
last year.
okay, UC Davis. Dana, okay, here we go with me in the name. I promised this. Abdelgadir, close, who is also a post-bac student at UC Davis, Dana, and Tijan Henderson, who is a third year undergraduate at UC Berkeley. I think I had all five. All of these students are wonderful. We support them. We give them scholarships. We do whatever we can. PMF gets a lot of information about scholarships. And so we want to make sure that if we send that information to you, move on it. For example, I just received yesterday, and Tracy may want to acknowledge this, or maybe she doesn't, that the White House is accepting applications under President Biden's executive office for interns for a paid internship, but they just sent it out and the application will be due like Monday or something. If anybody is interested in applying for that White House, I think it's a simple application and you can do it online. Just put it in the chat and I'll do a group email and send the application out to everyone. It is an awesome opportunity. It will start in June. And of course, you know, you would have to be in DC or you would have to be able to get to DC. So just put in your chat, White House, yes, White House internship. And we will pick those up and send them to you, okay? Okay, if you just say I'm interested, I don't know what that means, okay? Because I'm interested, I guess I'm interested means white. Okay, I'm gonna send it to everybody. How about that? Okay, because I thought it was just gonna be a few. Okay, I got it. I see it piling in. Okay, did I miss anybody? Did I miss any thank yous? You guys are wonderful. This has been a great group this year. Oh, I have one more thing. Someone asked in the chat about their applications. And the question, so why do you want to be a doctor? To explain what was going on when I said the question that usually they talk about their families. Does everybody remember that? So when they ask you the question of why do you want to be a doctor, they're asking you why you want to be a doctor, not that you experience your grandmother who has diabetes and she got sick. And that may be an inspiration, but why you want to be a doctor is speaking to why you want to be a doctor. You want to be a doctor because you want to combat disease or viruses, or you're not sure what specialty you want to do, but you want to be a part of the healing and health and wellness, of Californians or something. Everybody is going generic and talking about their community, but keep in mind when you say your community, no matter whether you are Black or you are Asian or you are whatever, or you are Hispanic, you are going to take care of everybody. So doctors, everybody is their community. So be careful and make sure you articulate, because you don't want to feel, and many of us have felt like this, that you're going to get a doctor that's more interested in taking care of one group and not the other group, okay? So a good doctor takes care of everyone, okay? And regardless of their ethnicity, their gender, all the diversity, the inclusion, they take care of everyone in their specialty, or they help you find a specialist that will help take care of you. So that's important. So just be careful. Understand the difference with indigenous populations, that Native Americans are considered and can call themselves indigenous, okay? And that if you're from another country and maybe you use that, but here, indigenous, when we see that, we're talking about the indigenous Indians from here. And so that's what that means, especially to medical schools. We know that many students are biracial, bi-ethnic. That's fine to put all of that. So to include that in your application, but just be careful, be thoughtful, be mindful of the fact that you're taking care of everyone. Even though we know about disparities, you can mention about disparities, you can mention about diversity, you can mention about inclusion, but understand that many of your patients are going to be all of that and then some, okay? I don't know, I'm not trying to preach to the choir, but I just have seen this year after year after year, people focus on just their community. Now, there's some people that really want to work in a rural area. That's fine to say. You really do want to work in a rural area, or you want to work in an urban setting, but you may change. Remember, when you start out in medical school, by the time you get to residency, it may be something else, okay? And then once you get through with residency, it may be something else, because Dr. Brown was in New York and now he's at Stanford. Okay. And that's a whole different community there, from being in New York and Brooklyn and to being in Palo Alto and Stanford. So it's a different set of patients, different look, the whole bit. And then the final thing that has my pet peeve is thank yous. If someone writes a letter, if someone gives you a grant, a scholarship, a stipend, do not send a one-line thank you to that person who has become a very integral part of your network. Make sure that the thank you is a match for what they gave you, okay? It is, a thank you represents you. It's more than just kindness. It represents to the person that you really appreciated what they did. And I just want to say that the person or the organization or the business, thank yous are critical, okay? And well-written thank yous address the person, address the organization, express maybe 2 paragraphs with 3 lines what it means to you. You are building a network, each one of you. And now PMF, this entire team is part of your network. Appreciate us. Use us, prepare. Use us, prepare. We will help you no matter where you are in the country, because we need you to succeed. We need doctors in this country. We need doctors in the world. So it's important. We need doctors of every diversity, every gender, every inclusion, every factor. We need you all to be the best that you can be. So with that said, anybody want to add? Tracy, Carolyn, any of the project coordinators, anything you want to add? No comments.
I think we can turn it over to the project coordinators. We will be, I'll just, I'll come on myself. Hi, everybody, it's Tracy. So this session is ending a little early, and many of the project coordinators have indicated that the groups would like to meet. So we've created a breakout room for each of the groups. Some of them weren't requested, but in case you want to meet, you have the opportunity to do so. Your project coordinators will be joining. If you are in one of Tijan's groups, you guys aren't set to meet, but I did create a breakout room just in case you guys wanted to talk, to give you that space. You will be in a breakout session on this Zoom, so you don't need to sign off and log on anywhere. It'll just automatically move you. If you are not moved to a breakout room, that is because either I did not see your name in the, your name wasn't listed, first name, last name, I'm not sure who you are, or you are potentially a parent who has arrived a little bit early. All right. So if you are a parent and you're here early, you're more than welcome to stay, but it'll just be a blank screen until 1:30. Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, so Tijan's groups, if you're in Tijan had 2 groups, Dana?
Yes.
Okay, so you're gonna put 2 groups in case you guys just want to meet. You may want to take an opportunity, because this is one of those times when you can take the opportunity to kind of beef up your go for the prize. So you're gonna leave everybody in, and then they're gonna move them all to their breakout rooms. Okay, based on the team topics that you've signed up.
That's right.
Okay.
Do the project coordinators have anything that you need to say before we sign off? All right.
I'll say that a couple of students have expressed to me like that they're not meeting with us today, and that's totally fine. But if you're unable to stay for this session, the meeting right now, please make sure you let me know. Shoot me an email. Yeah.
Okay, and it's important. By the way, we take attendance on all of these sessions. So if you want to make sure that you get both the DOB and the internship piece on your certificate, which is really important, because that's the dialogue that you can have in your interview, or you can mention in your personal statements. Please make sure you communicate with your project coordinator if anything is coming up. Okay. All right, I've said enough. Thank you guys, and
I'm sorry, Amy has a question.
Yeah, all right. I just wanted to, like, for my groups, I have 2, so I'm gonna hop into one, and in the meantime, the other one can like work on the project until I'll do my best to like hop around to both, but just want to let my groups know this is a chance for you to work on this together and get a lot done. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay, and remember, calendar May 14th for the closing ceremony for you and your parents, your families, everybody can attend. Okay?
All right, we'll look forward to seeing everybody on.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
If you weren't assigned to a room, just stay here and you can let me know where to move you off to. I'm going to go ahead and open up those breakout rooms.
Okay, and I'm going to send out the White House right now.
Live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the parents and families of our future doctors. Welcome to the Physicians Medical Forum, Doctors on Board Program and Community Health Internship. And this is the Parents and Family Workshop for those who have students who are going to be our future doctors. We are delighted that you are with us this afternoon, and we completely understand that for our students to succeed, your children, your students to succeed, that families and the entire village and network is so important that they are supportive. So we try to do this workshop to kind of give you a little introduction about what your students are going through, some of the things that you may have questions about, some things maybe you may want to step back and kind of understand the journey of going to medical school. So, and how you can be supportive, that's the real big thing. And maybe as parents, what you can do or should not do. So we are very fortunate to have a wonderful, wonderful couple. They are both doctors, they're both physicians. And I would like to introduce Dr. Stacy Hunt. She is a dermatologist with Kaiser. And I would like to introduce her significant, wonderful husband, Dr. Thurman Hunt. He is also on the Physicians Medical Forum Board, and he's an anesthesiologist at Alameda Health System. Welcome, and then they will proceed and introduce the rest of the panel after their introductions. Welcome, panel. Welcome, Dr. Hunt and Dr. Hunt.
Awesome. And thank you, Stefana, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you all for joining us for this panel discussion around understanding and navigating medical school and some of the costs. And we've got some wonderful students here with us this afternoon that are going to be able to share their experiences with you. And then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and let Alexis introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her journey and her experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexis Umoye. I'm from San Fernando Valley, about 30 minutes outside of LA. I went to UCLA for undergrad and now I'm a second year at Davis. My journey to medical school has been kind of all over the place. I took a couple gap years, kind of worked random jobs just to pay for my post-bac classes because by the time I graduated UCLA, my GPA was pretty low and I feel like my spirits were pretty broken as well. And so I feel like I needed that time off, not only to improve my application, but just to like heal and take a step back from this like very long journey. Now I'm at Davis right now. I'm studying for my first boards, which has really been challenging because I got a really bad bout of COVID, but it's been a year and I'm still in med school. So I just feel really, blessed these days to be here and to still be able to pursue this journey despite how long it is.
Great. Great, thank you, Alexis. And we're going to continue to support you because we know that, the journey to becoming one of the future doctors is not so easy. So we just want people to kind of like really understand that some of the times, we want to have a straight path, but some of the times those paths are not always straight, but you can always make it to your path. With that said, Dana, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, parents. My name is Dana Abdelgadir. I graduated from UC Berkeley a few years ago and then worked at Kaiser Permanente for a couple of years before coming back to do my post-bac here at UC Davis. And I am applying for medical school this cycle. So I'm not a med student just yet, but I have been on this journey for a very long time, been through undergrad, working post-bac, all in the pursuit of medicine. So I'm really happy to be here and I feel blessed to be here. And I know there's still a long path ahead, but I'm glad to be halfway through.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess what I would just want to say, or my first question to you, Alexis and Dana, is like, what is some of the challenges? What have some of the biggest challenges, and what have you done to be able to overcome those challenges while you have been pursuing your dream?
I can start. I think it's interesting now since I started undergrad in 2013, so it's been about 10 years of higher education towards this dream of being a doctor. And I think my challenges that I faced at UCLA are not very different, but the ones that I found most challenging are different than the ones that I found most challenging in medical school. However, I learned that a lot of the challenges I had in undergrad, which I thought would just go away if I worked harder or did something, that they would kind of just go away. But I think now I'm learning kind of just to live with that. These are kind of the challenges I'll face while I'm navigating academia. And it's really less about me and more about, medicine is just this really tricky path, and it's just very hard, and it's very time consuming and demanding, and it doesn't always leave room for every type of journey or the journey you envision. I think in undergrad, the challenges I really struggled with were like academic challenges. I think being at a UC school, I had like a lot of identity issues. You're like one of the only Black students in all these classes, and I don't know, I feel like it just got to me and it wore me down. And I think that, during undergrad, I definitely struggled with things like imposter syndrome and whatnot. I would say in medical school, I don't feel that way. I don't feel like I don't belong here anymore. I feel like, especially with just, my Black peers and just all that's kind of gone on these past few years, I just feel like, I belong here and I worked really hard. I took post-bac classes. I took the MCAT. I might have not gotten the 99th percentile, but I still did, the bare minimum of what needed to be done. And then I chose to kind of be great in other areas. And for me, that was community service and just giving back to the people that matter to me. And so I feel like in med school, I'm more so struggling with the time commitment, and like each year goes by and you kind of just are like, why am I not really like have a job yet, and why am I not working yet? And so it can kind of feel like this one long mundane journey, but I do feel more comfortable in it, and I'm learning more to kind of just advocate for myself and make the journey that I want and the best that I can make it, and that I actually have a voice. And so in med school, I feel like you have a bit more bargaining power than you do when you're in undergrad. I feel like I tell people, like, I'm not sitting for this test. I don't feel comfortable. I had COVID. I still am healing from COVID. That's not the best plan forward. And I feel like, at least at Davis, people take you more seriously. So I feel like it's been positive in the sense that I stopped letting the academic difficulties get to me so much, and I kind of just wade through them. And, they're just something that's a part of my journey. I've always struggled with taking tests, and I even ended up failing a couple of classes at UC Davis my second year. But I don't know, you just learn, like, these aren't like the end of the world. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be a doctor one day. I'm going to be serving my community, and that's what's most important. And that's what I really choose to focus on these days.
Yeah, so I was listening to you and I was trying to almost take some notes while I was listening to you, because I think that you brought up a lot of issues that I think that African-American medical students really do experience in terms of feeling alone. And I think that that's what's really important for parents to really understand. And really, I think that there's been this kind of like notion that if you ask for help, then there's a certain amount of weakness around that. And I think that it's actually quite the opposite. It's just understanding what some of those weaknesses are, because I think that medicine is moving toward a lot of collaboration and really having those really important discussions. So I think for the parents that are on the line, that, to really try to figure out some of the times, like, what are your students really experiencing, so that you don't always want to tell them what to do, but to make sure that they are seeking out the resources that can be available to them so that they can be successful. So Dana, I'll let you go ahead and answer.
Yeah, I would echo actually a lot of the Alexis experiences. I think I had a few challenges. So I think my first challenge in undergrad, I knew I wanted to go into medicine. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. but I didn't know how to get there. I'm the eldest daughter of immigrants. My parents knew nothing about medicine. They were very supportive, but they couldn't help me in that sense. I think maybe the most important thing that they did was teach me how to advocate for myself and seek out resources, because they knew they couldn't help me. They're like, well, you better figure out, go where you need to go to get what you need. So that was a little bit of a learning curve for me. Also, coming from a high school where I was always a straight A student, I was top of my class, and then going to a university that is so huge, you're in 200, 300 class lectures, student lectures. And I was overwhelmed. I was no longer, everybody there is a straight A student. We are all coming from the same place. And I think my challenge in that was learning to stand out, and also still believing in myself, and kind of facing that imposter syndrome that Alexis was mentioning. So it took a while, and especially as a woman of color, as a Black woman in those spaces, I felt like I was constantly looked at like I didn't belong in science. Again, you can look around a lecture hall of 200 people, you'll see maybe 5 Black students total. So I really felt like I didn't belong there, and I was having a hard time showing that I was a competitive student. So that took quite a bit of a learning curve. It took a while to find organizations like PMF, or places that I could really go to for help, people who could check me or give me the resources that I needed when I needed them, or direct me at least to where I needed to go. So I think that was really mitigated by my involvement with organizations such as PMF, mentorship programs, in spaces really that students share similar struggles and concerns. I think those are the biggest challenges for me right now. I mean, again, I worked, I came back. I'm not really the traditional student who applies straight out of medical school. And I think I grappled with that for a while, because my parents, again, didn't know much about medicine, and they were like, why aren't you applying right now straight out of medical school? It just wasn't making sense to them. But to me, I really had to trust my gut and trust the advice that I was getting from people around me, that like, if I wanted to do this, I wanted to do it right. So I took some time to really strengthen my application. I did feel like, oh, I'm adding so many years. I'm adding years to this already lengthy process. But I do think that what I've done in the past couple of years since graduating undergrad has really been incomparable, really, like, to anything else that I've done. And so I think that right now, I will go into this application process feeling much more confident and much more prepared, and feeling like I will get the outcome that I want, as opposed to a few years prior. And my parents understand that now. So it really took some grappling with, but I think it's really just a matter of knowing that there's not one path and one way to medicine, and to keep going.
Let me just chime in. Parents, you can put your questions in the chat if you have specific questions that you want to know about, and we'll monitor them and feed them to Stacy and Thurman, and they'll be looking also. So please feel free to add to the chat. Thank you.
I think to Dana's point, also just to kind of summarize, since, I relate so much with what you said, is oftentimes I feel like some pre-meds feel like they have to fight their parents when it comes to their non-traditional path. And, when you have to graduate and go and do a post-bac, which is not a degree conferring, or you have to go do something else that's not applying, I feel like that already kind of digs at you and cuts, and you're tired from undergrad. And so then to have to come home and defend yourself and prove, like, I can do this path to your parents and to your loved ones, it's an added layer that I think actually brings a lot of people stress and anxiety, especially because, majority of it, no one really has doctors in their families. If they do, it's like, okay, maybe just 1 or 2. It's not like an abundant thing. So I guess just with parents, like, being very mindful in how you're engaging your child about this journey, because there's just so much already undue stress from just being in the pre-med bubble and the med bubble and the residency bubble.
So thank you. So one of the things that I do want to just kind of backtrack a little bit just so that everyone kind of understands just the kind of like the traditional path, and then what some of the alternative paths, which is what we're talking about. So generally, you know, and I actually want to talk a little bit about one of a new a bill that has recently been passed for those of you, which may actually be extremely important in the sense that there are it was for a lot of the students who go to community colleges and do extremely well, then they are going to be guaranteed a spot in some of the colleges like Cal State, East Bay, things like that, and then guaranteed admission to medical school. So it's a new proposition that was just signed, and I believe the first cohort is going to be in 2024. So as we get more information, and I'm sure that Stelfana, you can reach out to PMF to get that information so that that is available. So that's just one of the newer paths for you all who have students who may be like juniors or seniors in high school who may be thinking about that, because I know that there's been such an incredible amount of pressure getting into colleges, SAT scores, and thinking about all of these things, but just understanding that that's a new pathway that's going to be coming up, and definitely an option. The second thing is that traditionally, you know, going through undergrad, and then sometimes people do take a year off if they're, as you have heard, like Alexis and Dana say, that if their GPA isn't what, or if they didn't do well on the MCATs, then these are some things and some opportunities for you to be able to strengthen your application. And there's quite a few programs around the country. My alma mater, which is the University of Michigan, takes a lot of underrepresented students over the summer, both in undergrad as well as medical school, helping them to be able to do well on their MCAT, how to prepare your applications for that. And then it's on to medical school, and there has been a ton of money that now has been poured into this. So I work for the Permanente Medical Group, and now there is the Bernard Tyson School of Medicine. They have already taken their first and their second classes, and now they have 3 additional classes that they are going to be taken, which is tuition free for over the next for their entirety of medical school. And then there's a lot of the historically Black colleges who have been gifted a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars from different organizations. And those of you who may or may not know, Mackenzie Scott, who is now the ex of Jeff Bezos, just gifted over about $12 million to the National Medical Foundation. So for those of you who may be in medical school, making sure that you do explore those opportunities to subsidize your income. So I just wanted to kind of put some of that information out there so that you all will know that it's nice if you can take that straight path, but understanding that there can be alternative paths and some funding that is not traditional to really to help to support those of you out there. One of the other questions I think is that, Alexis, what do you want to tell the parents? What's the best thing that they can do to help to support you? I mean, we hear about a lot of the challenges, and I know that some of the times you don't necessarily want to talk about what's going on, but you know, what is it that parents can do? Because I think it can be an extremely stressful time when you're there, and some of the times when parents are wanting to help, they're actually hurting instead. So what are some of the things that you and Dana may want to talk about where you think that would be extremely helpful and useful information?
And excuse me, Alexis, is specifically speak to how you think parents, as she said, parents can help, not from the student, but from how parents really can help, because that's this workshop is about. You and Dana. Okay.
I think that, you know, periodically when you're checking in with your child and their progress through academia, and you find out that they're having struggles, to really help them navigate why they're having those challenges. So I've had undiagnosed ADHD until I got to medical school. And so it's like something like that, where if your kid is struggling, you know, have they gone and seen, do they have a disability or a learning disability? Oh, do they just need additional tutoring or support services? So, you know, at UCLA, we have like a UMR, like tutoring center. Do they just need therapy? If you have the financial resources, you know, contributing to their therapist. I think that when you're struggling in college, especially, it's kind of easy to just kind of shut down and just feel like you have to push through. And so I think having someone else, especially like a parent, helping them kind of locate why they're having those challenges is really important, especially before medical school, in an environment where I feel like you don't really have time to kind of deal with these issues. And so if you can kind of figure out, you know, yourself, your learning style, if you have a disability, if you need additional tutoring, kind of what competencies you're not understanding before you get there, I think that that would be really beneficial to your children.
I have two answers to that. First, I would say teaching your children to empowering them, essentially teaching them to seek out resources when they need to. I think we have two sides of the spectrum. We have the parents who can't, you know, don't have insight to these things, and in that case, maybe teachers child how to go seek what they need. But there's the other side of the spectrum, parents who will try to find that information for their students and provide it for them. And I think that's doing them a disservice in a way, because the biggest thing I learned is that my parents are not going to be with me in college. So even if I was used to them doing this or doing that or giving me this resource, it's no longer there. And I think I've seen a lot of people struggle. I've seen peers struggle with not being able to advocate and find what they need for themselves, because they were either so used to having somebody do that for them, or they just didn't know where to start. And I think in both cases, really just instilling those skills early on, starting from high school, is really important. And I think the other big thing for me was understanding, as a parent, I think it's important to understand that this is a very intensive process. It's very time heavy. Science classes in undergrad and medical school, they're no joke. Like, it's really all no joke. And so I love my family so much, and they know that if they asked me to do anything, I mean, I went to Berkeley, and my family's from like the San Francisco Peninsula area. And so they were pretty close. If they asked me for anything, they knew I wouldn't say no. I would come home whenever they wanted me to, but they had to learn. And I think we had to set that boundary that I couldn't do that every weekend. I couldn't manage their expectations and also manage what I had to do at school. It just wasn't going to work. So I think understanding how students are so busy and so overwhelmed all the time that there kind of needs to be just, an understanding, a basis, a line where, you know, students will need to prioritize their education first. And it's important to always, obviously, as parents, express that you're there for them and support them in any way. But I really think it's also doing that also kind of entails stepping back when you need to, I think, and then being there when you need to. It's a really fine balance, I think.
So Stefana, thank you for answering some of the questions, but one of the other questions that I see here is, how do you manage your time with all commitments in college coming from high school? And I think I want to pony back on what Dana and Alexa have said, is just the priority. I think it's extremely difficult. It's really interesting because we have a son who is a junior in college, and we have a daughter who is a junior in high school. And it's really interesting because they both wanted to play sports in college. And I told them that I couldn't even think about playing sports in college because I wasn't going to make it through undergrad if I did that. So I just knew what my limitations were. And so I think it's to the point that both Alexis and Dana have made, is just to understand what the priority is. And I know that some of the times it's very difficult because you want to be able to be, everywhere all the time. And you have to start drawing those boundaries because time is not unlimited, and it's a limited thing that you're having to deal with. And you just want to make sure that you make it to your goal, because you can honestly say that once you do make it to your goal, then you will be able to have the time and to do all those other things that you want to do. Let's see, does anyone want to come off a mute or ask any questions? Because this is really an opportunity for you to ask. This is really an opportunity for you to ask questions from both of the medical students, as well as my husband and I, who have been practicing medicine for quite some time.
I have a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
My question is, I never worry about my daughter, her studies. Her studies are very important to her. What I worry about is I find myself hounding her to take time out for herself, to go get your nails done, go out with your cousin, do something for your mental health, self-care, so you're just not in front of a computer and in a book all the time. How do you guys find the time to prioritize your mental health, self-care?
That's a great question. Alexis or Dana, do you want to start off, and then I'll certainly go afterwards. Go ahead.
I think for me, I think in undergrad, you feel like you can juggle it more. And so it's something you just need to learn how to do and build. But I think in med school, medicine becomes so much of your life that it became a point where you could study forever and ever and ever. And I think the moment you recognize that, you're able to just step away and be like, I need to have a boundary. And I think a resident neurosurgeon told me this at Davis. He said, like, the earlier us or your child understands that, this is an endless type of field, the better. Because he was saying, if you don't know how to balance and prioritize fun in med school, you're not going to really be able to in residency, since each step of the way just kind of gets more tricky and more complicated until you're eventually attending, and even that has its challenges. So I think it's just important for them to know that these are the skills. If they learn them now, it's going to be much better off trajectory later, because it only kind of gets harder to have that flexibility to take time off.
I would say also scheduling in your breaks. I think that's something I'm just learning now in my post-bac program. I have never done that in my life. And it sounded so crazy to me when I got to this program, and they said, the first thing you want to put on your schedule are your sleep hours, and the next thing are your break hours. And it doesn't have to be a crazy long break, but put it in there and work around that. And I think once you have that down and on the schedule, and then you work in blocks of time where you just, go do what you have to do and really work really hard, it makes it so much easier to take that break when that break comes. And it also holds you accountable. I think okay, I have been working for X amount of hours. Now my schedule says I need to take a 30-minute break or an hour-long break, or I schedule ahead of time, if I want to say my nails done, or if I want to go have lunch with a friend, I'll schedule that days in advance so that I know what I have coming up, and then I can work around that, or make sure that I prep early on and I'm overly prepared so that when I need to take a break, I don't feel really guilty. And it's very hard. It took me 25 years years to learn that lesson, and I'm still trying to learn it, because it is easy to feel guilty. And I think that's the biggest thing you struggle with as a student, like, oh, I shouldn't have taken that break because da, 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 da. But no, I think you know, at the end of the day, it really also emphasizing that when you come back from your break, you're going to be 10 times more effective. Like, you just feel refreshed and you feel like, oh, okay, I have my nails done. I feel cute, or I feel like I had a little break and I had some time to socialize and see the outside world. I'm not trapped up in this room studying for so long. Now I feel like I'm mentally refreshed and I can go even harder in my studying or whatever it is I need to do. So time management and really knowing that breaks are really essential and critical to doing well.
Stacy, I'd like to add one thing too. This came from another workshop from some parents. And one of the things that was very clear that the parents all got was, how do you control the ask, the ASK of your student, who in high school and, you know, previously you could ask the student to do this, or you would tell them about what their brother needed or what grandma needed, you know, the whole bit. And the ask, controlling the ask, and in other words, the request from parents to those students who are pre-med and in medical school is really, really important. It's hard. It's hard for a parent, but it's important because their time management and their time control is so difficult and such a long journey. So monitoring yourself as parents in terms of what you used to ask, and now you got this kid that's preparing for medical school or even in medical school, needs to be very much monitored. I remember, although I didn't go to medical school, I remember when I was at Cornell getting my master's degree, and I had a sister and a brother, and my brother got into some trouble, and everybody would say, "Oh, you're going to call her and tell her, you know, when you going to call her and tell her?" Because he had injured himself. And my mother turned around and said, "No, she's in school. I'm not calling her to tell her this crap. Okay, let her alone." I didn't find out that my brother got in trouble until the summer. So the parent managing those kinds of things, what you're asking and what you're telling your student, because sometimes they feel guilty, as Dana is saying. So I just wanted to throw that out. Okay.
Yeah, and so, yeah, thank you, Stefana, Alexis, and Dana. And the one thing I will say is taking time for yourself is a lifelong struggle. It is not something that you're going to be able to say, okay, I can do this, and then all of a sudden, you know, really stick with it. I think the most important thing is understanding when you do need to really take that break. And I think, you know, parents tuning in to, and then encouraging your students or to do things that you know that they love to do. So not really suggesting ideas, because I tell sometimes people, it's just like taking that walk, or sometimes it's just journaling, or sometimes it's just reading a different book, or sometimes it is getting that manicure, or sometimes it is going to the spa, and sometimes it's just picking up the phone to talk to a friend who you haven't talked to in a long time. And so a lot of these things can be extremely helpful. But the one thing that I would probably say works really well is that if you can find a buddy, if you have a local buddy, great, that helps keep you accountable. Because I think that a lot of times, you know, your friends know when you need to take that break, or when they'll say, okay, now you're really sounding crazy, or you're really overwhelmed, and somebody who's going to really tell you the truth and be honest with you and hold you accountable. I can't really tell you like how valuable that really is, because even now I know that I do more walking when my friend wants to go walking with me as opposed to getting out there and doing it alone. So I just think that, you know, just really trying to encourage your student, because these are lifelong habits. This isn't just something that you want them to adapt while they're studying, but you want them to get into a habit and a lifelong pattern of what works for them. Like I have like some of my colleagues who were swimmers in college, and they still, you know, 2 to 3 times a week go and do their swimming, you know, as physicians. So just really encouraging them to practice some of the things that they want to do.
Okay, you have a question in the chat. You have a couple of questions, in fact. What GPA do students need to maintain to apply to medical school? That's a quick answer. Anybody? Dana, do you know what it is? Off right offhand?
It varies for each.
The range. What's the range? Just give them the range.
If you're above a 3.0, you're like, you know, there.
Okay.
I would say what the UC say is competitive is a science of a 3.2, 3.3 or higher.
Okay.
But people get in with below that.
Yeah. And I would note that they look at the science GPA as opposed to the overall GPA. They look at both, but really the emphasis is on the science GPA, which is, you know, if you've taken all your prereq classes, your medical school prereqs and other hard sciences, that's one thing. But, you know, classes like English or sociology or like social, you know, social science classes don't factor into that science GPA that they look at.
Okay, Stacey, you have another question. Actually, it's a 2-part question. One, is there a support group for parents? And I can answer that part for PMF going to medical school. And the second question, part of that question is, can someone explain a little bit more about what a post-bac program is? So the first part, is there a support group for medical parents of medical students? PMF doesn't have a parent group, but you know what? You just gave me an idea. And who is that? That's Ms. Love. Theron, we need to talk about that, okay? As a board, okay? Yeah. And maybe we can do something that that will be a special session for parents of future doctors, not doctors on board, but totally separate from that for the parents, okay?
Yeah. Then I think that brings up a really great point. And I think, you know, the thing that we're really beginning to find out is, you know, I think with her question is that the more that we talk about a lot of these issues and concerns that we're having, then we can really begin to be able to collaborate, because the one thing that I don't want to not talk about, because I think that I would be remiss if I did, is that, you know, when we talk about, you know, like what we've heard Dana and Alexis say is that sometimes you walk into the class, you know, there may be 200 people and you may be the only one, or there may only be, you know, 2 of you. And so that isolation and that racism that people do experience when they are, and how do you learn how to manage that, even with all of the other challenges and demands that are being put on you in addition to your studies. And I think that this is once again, another real opportunity for parents to educate themselves so that they can really know how they can actually support their students also, because some of the times it's not always just the academic challenge, it's some of the social stuff that some of the students may be managing. So I think that this is a really, the point is that I think that a parent group can be extremely useful and helpful. And I think that there was another question, post-bac, what is that? So Alexis or Dana, if you want to take that.
I can take it on. I also see there's another question about improving MCAT scores. I'll say I haven't taken my MCAT yet, so I'll let Alexis take that one on. But post-bac, so there was another question saying, is there a workbook, handbook that talks about various ways? There is not. And I want to emphasize that there is not one way or any specific way to go into medicine. You can do whatever you want, but not whatever you want, obviously within a certain realm of things, and you can still end up being a doctor. It really just is about what works for you and what works for the student. So a post-bac program is usually a 1 to 2 year program. Most of them are 1 year programs where there's two types. There's an informal type and a formal one. So an informal post-bac would really just be a student who has graduated undergrad, so post undergrad, taking classes that would, science classes, strictly science classes that would improve their GPA. And so that's an informal program. You can do that anywhere. You can do it at a community college. You can just sign up for classes that you want to take at any university campus. A formal post-bac program, I think like the one that I'm in now, is a structured program. It's a 1 year program where they really focus on, and I think this is why it was important for me to go the formal route. They focus on really creating a well-rounded and prepared applicant for students who maybe feel like they are not a competitive or the ideal applicant just yet. And so you can do a post-bac for a variety of reasons. It could be to improve your GPA, to take more of those science classes. It could be really, you didn't get any letters of recommendation in undergraduate and you have no connections with professors and you need to take a few more classes and build relations to maybe get some letters of recommendation. It could be for a variety of reasons. For me, my program is really immersive. They help you prepare your application from start to finish. So we take science courses to improve your GPA. They provide letters of recommendation and really teach you the skills that it takes to be a good medical student. They really foster knowing how you learn and building the stamina really that it takes to be in med school, and then also provide MCAT. And so there are some people who've taken MCAT and are in post-bac programs to maybe learn more and then take it again. There's people like me, I haven't taken it yet, but they provide you with MCAT resources. And so we're simultaneously working on classes, taking classes, we're working on our application. They really help with personal statement. They have a writing specialist who really helps you work on your personal statement, and also working on MCAT, taking MCAT classes concurrently and preparing you to take that MCAT and get your application in. So there's a variety of ways to do it. That's a formal post-bac program, but really in its essence, a post-bac program is really to make you a more confident and competitive applicant if you feel like maybe you need that extra boost that you didn't receive in undergrad. And in terms of, I think there's a question about funding it, financial obligations, attending a post-bac program. How can you assist your students? If you can, assist financially, that's amazing because it is expensive. They don't offer financial aid. They might offer some stipends, but most of it is loans. So loans are available, but if you have the power to support financially, I mean, that's amazing.
Let me just add, and I put this in a chat, Stacy, we'll send to parents and families the Princeton review information regarding applying for medical school. It includes the cost, it includes the kinds of things that the students will have. I'll see if they can package that. And Thurman, I'll talk to you guys about that a little bit, okay? And we'll send that to you. So that'll help you understand not only what they have to prepare for, but the cost. And a lot of times they have various scholarships and funding opportunities for students to take and to take advantage of to receive the MCAT prep information. Okay.
And I think I did see like one other question in the chat, and it was regarding about like a master's program or something like that. And that is another path that people sometimes take, getting their MPH if they don't get into medical school, or if they're GPA isn't where it needs to be. So I do think that is definitely an opportunity for individuals who are interested in pursuing that path. Because I think that once again, if you do bring your GPA up while you're in that master's program, it definitely gives you an opportunity to improve your application and the likelihood of you getting into a medical school. Some of the times I know that, you know, if people don't do well on the MCAT, there are a lot of like preparatory courses, like Stefana has said, like the Princeton Review and things like that. And Kaplan used to do it. And I think it's just a matter of, you know, people taking the test. You know, for anxiety around tests, I think part of it, you know, what I learned is that some of those times people have to know what their challenges is when they are taking standardized exams. Some of the times people just, you know, once they've taken an exam, sometimes they don't do well. Then it's like, oh my gosh, they start telling themselves that they're not going to do well. And I think that it becomes more of a self-defeating purpose. And so I think that the more comfortable you become with the material, and then just some of the times just learning how to, in like multiple choice questions, you know, getting rid of some of the answers that you know are wrong. And sometimes you end up with only 2 choices, and then all of a sudden there's something in your mind that's like, oh my God, I remember that. And so there's just different test strategies. So I don't know, Dana or Alexa, if you want to contribute something else to that, but those are some of the things that I have found that have worked in the past.
Yeah, I think generally, like, I'm not an MCAT specialist, but I think like just locating kind of what is going wrong. I mean, I'm working with our learning specialist right now for my boards, and so, you know, kind of seeing why there is a gap, and is the gap consistent? Is it a content gap or a test taking gap? Because if you can kind of locate the gap, it'll be easier to kind of figure out what resource to link the student with. Also, my friend, with what Dr. Hunt said, didn't do so great on the MCAT and had severe anxiety for her first board. So she ended up actually working out a plan with her school psychiatrist with different modalities per se to kind of tackle that. So I think, you know, every student, there will be some students who these exams really will just cause them great distress. So I don't ever think it's a terrible thing to at least go and see a psychiatrist. You know, you don't necessarily have to do or take or give into what they say. But I think for her, she found it very helpful, went on to score really high on both of her boards and passed. And yeah, but prior to taking those, she had a lot of anxiety from previous experience from the MCAT.
We have about 5, 6, 7 more minutes. Are there any other really, did we miss it? Okay, Dr. Stacy. Is this one? Okay, Stacy, that's one I think you can answer directly. It says, I had a visit with a dermatologist. I think it's more personal, so maybe you want to type that back in chat.
I don't see, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. So that's a little bit more personal.
Yeah, I don't see that. Where is
right?
That?
You can answer that on in the chat or just send it directly to her. It's you'll see it.
Okay.
Okay,
so
you got it.
No, I don't see it. But one of the other questions that just came through is, how often do you see folks with law degrees thrive in the medical field? I think that, you know, having combined degrees is definitely a way of the future. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. And if you have the stamina to get both a JD and an MD, then I think it's go for it. I mean, because we are seeing lots of things around just understanding you know, how unconscious biases and things like that impact medicine. And I think the more we have people that really understand how to make policies around that, I mean, there's tons of policies that need to be made. And so, like I said, I think if you have the stamina to do it, I think that, you know, people who have MBAs, they can run hospitals, MPHs and MDs. Those are the people who are working in the communities and really making sure, because we as physicians only really address 1/6 of social determinants. And so really having a really broad net of what you understand, I think is incredibly important. So I'm all for support of higher education. And so if that's something that people want to do, then definitely think about it. What would be the best way to incorporate engineering? Well, engineering, it depends upon what you're interested in. There's artificial intelligence now, which is becoming such a huge part of medicine. That is a way to do it. EPIC, which is now the electronic medical records. A lot of people do that. There are certain specialties which actually lend themselves to people who have majored in engineering, such as like radiology and things like that. So I think that that's kind of like a way to really think about that.
In addition, there's robotic medicine, and Thurman, maybe you probably have seen some of that and some of your experiences to chime in terms of if you have an engineering and skillful and.
Yeah, I'm an anesthesiologist, and there's quite a few people who have engineering backgrounds to go into anesthesia. So yeah, that's pretty common. And also orthopedic surgery, mechanical engineering, prostheses. There's lots and lots of opportunities, especially for medical devices. So yeah, it's a good opportunity to also have an engineering degree. And in my medical school class, we had quite a few students who had undergraduate degrees in engineering, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering.
Okay. The other thing is some of you, and I saw this from another one, I think it just came to me, about young men, young, African-American men, young Hispanic men, the whole male question of going to medical school, because we know that right now there's a lot of women applying. Maybe there's some encouragements to parents of male children, male boys' children, and I know you have a wonderful son. Maybe you can speak to that about how do you just continue to encourage those guys to keep going, because the girls are doing it. And not to say that they don't need encouragement too now, but you got some words that maybe you can say to encourage the parents of young men.
I don't know for sure how to best encourage them, but I think that everybody knows that the number of African-American and Hispanic males compared to females in medical school has been dropping over the years. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities out there for people, but actually going into medicine, because of the long, and I noticed this also from my son. I tried to encourage him to go into medicine at one time, but he wanted to go just engineering because like everybody else, they get really, with the length of time it takes to become a doctor, right? And it's just so long, so much school. Dad and my son would say, I can't go to school for that long. But I tell them it's the journey, you got to take it, one step at a time. And the undergraduate part is a lot different from the medical school part. And, during that time, you have chances to do research, have chances to, take on jobs if that's what you want to do. And it's not like it's straight school, straight through. And the last couple of years of medical school is kind of like a job. So the and the clinical part. So, yeah.
Yeah, that just to add to what he's saying, just remember, parents, this journey from college to the end of residency is anywhere from 13 to 16 years, 4 years of college, 5 years of medical school, 45 years of medical school, 5 years of residency. And then sometimes they tack on another fellowship, right, Thurman? Safety. So you're talking about a real journey. That's why we all use the word journey. and there's a commitment to that. And obviously his son made a different choice, but we're glad that you guys all have kids that are choosing this choice. So, okay. Any other, let's see, thank you for sharing. Oh, Stacy's email. Does anybody need other emails? I promise you I will get that information out to you parents. And Thurman and I, and from the PMF board, we will really talk about how do we set up some kind of parent group. That can be pretty taxing, for us, because we're a very small organization, and it would take someone that has to manage that. And then parents, if they need to follow up with us, if we set up something beyond they're going to have to do the same thing that they're telling the students, and that is time commitment. You can't say, oh, I got to go run and do this. You got to manage the time. So if we're going to try to set up something, it won't be right away, but we're going to see if we can try to set up something and invite not only the parents of the 2022, but probably 2019, 2020, 2021 parents, because we've had these before and they've been doing this a few years now, and there's lots of parents. Okay. Let's see, any other burning questions on their emails? Everybody got the emails that they wanted? Somebody asked about clinical opportunities. That's a whole nother question. Whoever asked about their student need, ask your student, because we went over that in previous workshops with that people address clinical and other internships and shadowing and all of that. Ask your student about that, because if they attended all the sessions, they went over that. Okay, and there was a lot of information that's been shared over the last 4 weeks about those opportunities. Okay, did we miss anything else? Thank you so much. Anything else, anybody that we miss?
Well, if we did that, we asked that they come off of mute so that we can make sure
Okay,
that we
that's
have
great.
answered all of
That's
the
great.
questions. We know that there's a lot that's been coming through. So if you do have any questions that you may have, then certainly feel free to come off of mute.
Anybody?
Okay.
Well, there's one other organization, let me add, the Student National Medical Association. Student National, so it's snma.org, and they have a national, and then they have state and regional sections. So parents can visit that. You can just Google and see things on that about medical school and what it takes and post-bac programs and all that other good stuff. Okay. All right. I think we are past our time. If there's nothing else, I would like to just thank Dr. Hunt and Ms. Okay. Alexis. I'm not going to blow it. I'm not going to even try botching your name. Okay. I get it. Okay. And Dana, thank you all for this wonderful, wonderful workshop. And thank you, parents. And look forward from an email from dob@pmfmd.com. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Tracy.
For coming, and you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.